So, Alistair, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Um, I'm excited to get into this, and I always like to go back to the start. Can you remember your first exposure to, I suppose, movies in general as like a an audience member?
Yeah, very much so. So my father was a pilot in the Air Force, and when I was about 12 or 11, turning 12, we moved to an Air Force base in Western Sydney, and and we lived on base for about 4 years. And there wasn't much to do. There was a swimming pool there, so we swam all the time, football field, stuff like that. But there was a cinema, and it was sort of fascinating. It was this beautiful old, classic old big cinema standalone building, strangely enough, set in the middle of the drive that you drove up when you came into the base. And they played all the contemporary movies. They had retrospectives. They had everything. It was amazing for an Air Force base. I didn't realize at the time. I just assumed, you know, I took it all for granted because there must have been, I suspect, some very avid film lovers who would have been Air Force people, airmen or whatever, who love film, and you could see anything. Now, I didn't have any cinema education, and at that time didn't have any interest in it at all. I'm not sure I was interested in much more than girls and maybe sneaking a cigarette behind the dunnies at school or something. But we used to go, in the end, sort of like when you're stuck in a place like that, we used to go to the cinema, at least twice a week, I reckon, and we saw everything that came through, and probably stuff that we shouldn't have seen. I distinctly remember, so I must have been 12, and it's always stuck in my mind, and it's probably affected me more than it should have, seeing um, Carpenter's The Thing when I was
Yeah.
12, and walking back from the cinema, and just being absolutely terrified. I mean, having never seen that sort of transmutation stuff, it's kind of funny. You look at it now, and it's really interesting, actually. And I'd recommend, if you're interested, to watch some of those. I'm not really into it, but you have those videos where you watch people watching shit,
Yeah,
and see some contemporary people watching The Thing, because all the prosthetics are all real. Everything's in camera. There's no digital visual effects whatsoever. So they just did this incredible. If I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, it's just, and it's gross and so surprising. And if you remember the first scene where the spoilers, people, but the husky dog's face goes
yeah,
it's open like that. It's like, whoa, when you're like 12 years old going, holy shit, and then you're like, all that crazy stuff. Um, but I saw some wonderful, wonderful films. Blade Runner, which sort of subsequently became probably my favorite film. Although at the time I was a bit like, it's not as fun as Star Wars, but I was only
yeah.
12. Um, so yeah, no, I had this sort of very strange cinema education where we watch everything from, the soft porn stuff, and it's the 80s as well. And I feel kind of terribly blessed, because it's all film prints, it's all projected on film, films shot on film, And so if the projectionist wasn't right, some of the stuff they shoot, full gate Super 16, and then the projectionist has to actually provide the letterbox, and if they're not onto it, you can actually see. I went to a projection. I remember watching. Actually, it was years later, but the same idea, and you can actually see the actors walking around in slippers, and going, "Why are they wearing slippers? That's really weird," And then you realize, oh, it's because they haven't put the letterbox up in the projection booth. And I don't know, as a sort of a cinema, you know, purist, I suppose I just love all that shit, and the sound. Sorry, I'm going on a bit here. Forgive me. Just jump in if you get
No,
bored.
you're fine. It was something you said there about the practical effects of something like The Thing, and it's something I'm kind of fascinated by now. I don't know if you feel this from a I suppose both a professional and an audience standpoint, but I feel like people are maybe turning a little bit of a corner again, where they seem to be really appreciating like practical in camera effects again over, while they can be great sometimes, like watching a movie that's just all CG can kind of take you out of the experience a little bit. I feel like people are starting to, like you said, I've seen so many videos on YouTube channels with millions of followers where people go back and rewatch some of those movies and they seem to be blown away by the fact that, oh, this is all real in camera.
Yeah, very much so. I think I would argue that really fundamentally it's not about digital effects or prosthetics, whatever it is. It's just about truth. So if you're trying to tell something in a truthful space, as soon as the audience member goes, nah, that's not there, and they're drawn out of that moment, then you've kind of lost them. So, I was watching the other night. I think it was just on free-to-air television. I don't think we're even streaming, but it's one of the new Star Trek ones, but the first of the new series done by Josh Whedon or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I was going, this is really cool. Like, it's really good cinema, and I think it's the best one that he made. And even though there's a lot of digital effects, of course there have to be, you still kind of accept that it doesn't become about the visual effects. They're just sitting there in the background. It's about the drama. It's about the setup and the presentation and the performances and those things that fundamentally is driving everything. And I think it's when things sit back. I mean, a good comparison might be, by way of example, the first Guardians of the Galaxy versus the second Guardians of the Galaxy. And for me, I really enjoyed the first one. That became one of our family sort of favourites, because it's all about character and story and fun and being silly, and and then the second one was sort of, it felt very contrived, and suddenly the contrivances, it's like, hey, we can sit back and spend $50 million on doing all this, great technical stuff. And it doesn't work. And interesting enough, I did a rewrite on a film last year, which hasn't been made, and I don't think it will. And it was really interesting. It came to me, and it was a sort of a ghost story Western. And, I wasn't huge on the script, but I was great on the concept. And I mean, it was one of the tricky balances is trying to work out, you're only, when you work in a genre space, the hardest part is you never really get much money to play with. It's rare that a studio is going to deal with a genre piece unless it's already a kind of a known property. And I haven't, unfortunately, entered that exalted world yet. So I'm sort of working with smaller budgets. And anyway, they wanted to make this thing in Australia, but set in Mexico and America and the south part of North America. And, it's sort of a road movie with bad guys on horses. Ultimately, that sort of evolves into a creature feature. And that was one of my big pitches with the guys. And in fact, if I was to show you the lookbook that I kind of whipped up for them, it was literally using those John Carpenter pictures from The Things, going, if you're going to go, because one of the characters, it was this sort of very beautiful female who actually was this hideous creature underneath that sort of comes out. And I was like, we've got to do that in camera. I think if you try to do it digitally, it's going to feel wrong. But there's something about that analog nature of shooting it in camera, and the actors interacting with it, and you've got the fake blood spraying everywhere and splattering on the lens and getting on the other actors and all that kind of stuff, and you can light it in a way, and so it's tangible and real. And so there's that interesting thing. I mean, when you go back and watch the thing now, knowing what's coming up, you can kind of see it. Like, they look a bit rubbery figures, and and all that kind of stuff. But at the time when you're seeing it initially, particularly, as I say, shot on film and screened on film with the sound, all that wonderful stuff. It's incredibly compelling, in the space that it is, as a creature feature thing. So anyway, again, I'm crapping on it, forgive me, but I think it's fundamentally your responsibility, depending on the film you're making, your responsibility is truthfulness. And when the audience can see through the facade, then I think you've lost them.
It's funny because out of all the conversations I've had, I don't think I've ever heard anyone explain it that way, which is really interesting, because now that you mention it, like the weekend, I went, I don't know if it's the same over there. I think a lot of regions are doing it where they have, I think, is it the 25th? No, I don't know what year it came out. It's some anniversary of the Revenge of the Sith.
20 years. I said that to my wife yesterday. Yeah, it blew me away, because it was just an anecdote. She and I went and saw it at the cinema and just pissed ourselves laughing through the whole thing, and got in big trouble from the people around us. It seems so silly, but anyway. So,
Yeah,
so
and it's funny that you
couldn't believe it.
mentioned about CG effects and stuff like that. So I went to see it on Saturday, and while I was there, I was kind of laughing at myself because I was like, "Isn't it funny how like most people accept this movie for what it is?" And I only realized, I think, upon rewatching it again a second time in a cinema, I was like, "This entire thing basically is CG," and I can clearly tell
Yeah.
that, but everybody kind of accepts it. But then sometimes I think the audience flips it and goes, "Oh no, well I don't like that movie because it's CG." And it's like, but this one is okay. I'll accept,
Mm.
Star Wars or whatever. And I think it probably does lead to what you said about, that kind of truth aspect rather than practical versus, computer generated.
I think absolutely, for sure, and it's got to be a mix of everything. I'm attached to a picture which we're hoping to be making soon, actually in Malta, and it's a thriller, a kind of survival thriller thing. It's a simple movie, but the tricky part is, again, dealing with budget, but a large portion of it's going to have to be shot in a green screen environment, by the nature of, because it's set basically in cable cars suspended above a ravine, with a river and jungle and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. And so, like, well, we can't get the actors into that environment, obviously, and it's funny. I was actually watching Mission Impossible last night, going, they can do it. They would probably just go, you know what, we'll just build the cable car system and we'll do it in Thailand or something and spend $100 million. But if you've got $10 million, you can't do that. So you're kind of going, well, how do we do it? And it has to be safe for the actors. It has to be safe for the stunt people too. There's a lot of gags in this, and even getting an actor, 3 meters above the ground, becomes a technical issue, like a safety issue. You'll probably have to have the actor, well, not probably, you will definitely have to have the actor, strapped into a safety line type system, which, sometimes if it's done well, it can be invisible, but other times, it'll be seen and it has to be painted out. So then suddenly an in-camera shot becomes a digital shot because you're just getting rid of the thing. But it's like, well, okay, so now I've got an actor 3 meters high standing on top of this cable car. I've got two actors standing on two cable cars, and they're kind of having a face off against each other. And they're 70 meters above, hypothetically, according to the story,
Yeah.
50 meters above the ground or above the river in a jungle with wind and fog and all these things going on. So, well, how do you do it? And really, so we're at the moment sort of trying to work out, well, exactly how the answer to that question, how do we do it? And we've come up with some interesting sort of ideas about trying to and particularly shooting this in Malta when it's set in a jungle. And as you may be aware, there are no jungles in Malta, funnily enough. So going, well, how would this work? So then it's like, well, what about if the cable car system, as it goes through this ravine, has to, on one side is a cliff that falls away, so that at the appropriate point it can kind of stop or park itself in front of the cliff, and that way I can be working in an environment where a lot of my coverage, I've got the cliff in the background, but if I come home, then I can green screen out or mat it or roto scope it, et cetera, so you have to deal with, you're kind of forced to deal with what you have to deal with in a way. It's part of the business, I suppose. It's not, if you were Steven Spielberg, you would just say, this is how we're doing it, and I don't care how much it costs, and this is what we'll do. You can do it that way, but I think the rest of us have to
don't have that like unlimited budget. From an audience standpoint, people probably have no concept of this. I think a lot of people would assume, okay, you're based in Australia, maybe the studio or the company that you're shooting a movie for is based in the States, maybe, let's say, and then you mentioned Malta, and a lot of people go, oh, but does that not make, okay, you got to make a movie with a jungle, but you're going to Malta and there's no jungle, and now you've got to bring all these people together, and is that not more money? And like I see that a lot where there's been a lot more pictures shot in Ireland in the last like 5-10 years, and a lot of them, I guess the landscape doesn't lend to the concept. And I was always fascinated by, how does that make sense though? Why would we come to Ireland if it is literally like the polar opposite of why? I suppose in layman's terms, how could you explain that to you know, an audience member who is kind of fascinated by those decisions?
It's just money. It's fundamentally it's a production system that's chasing tax breaks. So, and it's very, very competitive. So Malta has one tax system that's set up. Australia has another. And you look at the pros and cons of dealing with what you're doing. In our situation, we've got a production company that's been working very successfully out of Malta. So they've got all the relationships in place in terms of the people they're working with, the teams they're working with, the government officials that they work with to get access to the rebates, et cetera, et cetera. So from their point of view, they're thinking, well, we've got a big slate here, so this becomes just one of another film that we're doing. Like everything, I mean, filmmaking is the art of illusion. So we'll end up having a second unit that goes to Thailand or Malaysia or wherever it's going to be, and we'll get coverage that we can use to support what we're shooting. But fundamentally, when you kind of sit down and work out what's the cheapest way to do something and what's the best benefit from that, money wise, it's all money. It's always money. Unless again, if you're a producer director, if you're Ridley Scott, you can just go, no, we're shooting it in. Well, actually, interesting enough, I mean, even Ridley is sort of like, he shoots a lot of stuff in Eastern Europe, for example, because again, the same thing. It's like, how do I turn? I've got $60 million US, but I need 120 for the vision. Well, what do? Well, if I go to,
Bulgaria seems to be a big one.
Bulgaria, exactly. Bulgaria is a great example. I go to Bulgaria, then my 60 million becomes, 90 million, plus they've got a tax, just through the exchange rate.
Yeah.
Then I've got I can get another 30 million. In Australia, for example, some of the governments, the state governments here throw money at the big productions. Baz does his films here. Baz Luhrmann, does big films. He did Elvis was his last one he did here. And I think the state government, I don't know, and I'll get in trouble because I don't know exactly the numbers, but, tens of millions of dollars just kind of gifted to the production on top of all the various tax breaks and the payroll tax breaks and the rebates and so on and so forth, So it's very competitive. And I made a film in America, in Ohio, and it was a Canadian story, strangely enough, Canadian boxing story. And when they're setting it up, it's like, oh, we'll shoot this in Vancouver or Toronto or wherever. And then about a week, a couple of weeks, really, I think the plane ticket had me bought. So before I got on the plane to fly over there, they're like, oh no, we've decided to shoot in Ohio. And it's sort of like, okay, but what about all the bits of Canada that were kind of part of the story? Well, we'll just rework the script and we'll set it in America. And sort of like, but it was based on a true story about a Canadian Sikh boxer. So then it had to be set in America. Anyway, and look, and the truth is I'm a slut, I'm a whore. I'll do anything for money. And so, if they say we're in America now, then that's where we are.
Is that in any way like I would assume, the goal, as you mentioned earlier, about, I don't know if it is everybody's goal to get to that stage, where you can be a Spielberg or a whoever, and you can just kind of have, I suppose, unlimited funds to a degree and just be like, yeah, well, this is the vision I have, this is the story I want to do, and we can just do that, and there's no real concern about having to go one way or the other. But is there a part of you that enjoys that kind of and when we say lower budget, like, I mean, there's still a lot of money on the line, but in the sense of that more kind of gritty, like, we have to figure out things, we have a lot of different I suppose, walls that you have to get over and things to figure out, and okay, well, we can't do this, maybe we'll do that, I have to change this. Do you enjoy that type of filmmaking?
I do enjoy that aspect of, with that question. I'm a sort of a natural problem solver. One thing I know, so the biggest film I've made was a $30 million film, and James Cameron produced that. And what I discovered, and Universal Pictures were the distributor in America and producers. And what's interesting that I discovered is, even when you're working in a bigger space, their expectations about what we would deliver for that $30 million was, if we give you 30, we expect an $80 million film. So you're actually doing the same thing. You're always fighting a budget. And talking to James about it, it's always a shit fight, even with his avatars and so on. And that's where I met him on the set of Avatar when they were recruiting for that picture, and I flew out there in second unit on Avatar, and that was an amazing experience. And I was sort of watching him work, and of course you marvel at it because there was a whole different thing going on there, because not only was it 3D, they were working with these virtual systems and all sorts of stuff in ways that no one had ever done before, and I mean just technologically groundbreaking. So sort of seeing that firsthand was like, Jesus, what's going on here, and then dealing with all the problems that came with that too. I mean, it was massive. I haven't been to the set of his last film, or the one that they're doing now, which I imagine is even bigger. Just more moving parts, more people. But I know from him, just talking to him, it's just always a shit fight. There's never enough money, never enough time. And if you're someone like Jim, I mean, the stories I'd hear about him shooting Avatar, I mean, he was shooting pickups on that movie like, weeks before it was released, and driving everyone insane, as you can imagine, because he's just a perfectionist, and he just, if you shoot, if I can just get a bit tighter, if I can just, if the light on that's not quite right, if I can, all of that stuff. I mean, he's absolutely a perfectionist and possibly mildly bonkers. So it's sort of interesting. I don't think it ever changes. You just have a bigger, and then what comes with that too are more stresses, more pressures, the expectations. I mean, it was a real whirlwind experience for me. There's a movie called Sanctum, which is this sort of action adventure cave diving movie, survival thriller, and it was an incredible adventure for me going, because the film before that was a $3 million war movie, and then suddenly you get invited to make this picture, and it's like, oh wow, and and the premieres on Hollywood Boulevard at the Chinese Man Theatre, and you're staying at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills, and as you walk outside to have a fag, and paparazzi are calling your name from the driveway, and you're like, oh, I've made it, I'm in Hollywood, all this sort of stuff. So having that experience, but then also, the film opens on the Friday night, and they look at the numbers on the Saturday morning, go, oh yeah, this is what you'll take, and kick you out of the hotel Sunday morning, and then you're back in your shitty rental accommodation, and you beat up rental car, and you're back to reality, and you've made a film that's just another film. It's not going to win Oscars, and it's not going to make $1 billion, and so you're in the reality of that world, which sort of comes home pretty fast.
Yeah,
I've gone sideways on that. Forgive me, I distracted myself.
No, you're fine. It's fascinating, and just to hear you mention that, because I was going to bring up Sanctum, obviously, and just your experience, and looking back on it now, and it's interesting. I always love to hear, I guess and I know the audience too as well, that the real version of how this business works. It's not all, because a lot of people would assume. I remember when Sanctum released here, and it was like, we were first starting to get like 3D cinemas and 3D screens and stuff like that. And it was like this big fucking event, and everybody was like, wow, I see this movie and it's going to be crazy. And it felt so huge. And then like to hear you say like, yeah, you're the guy for a weekend, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, whatever next. It's like, we've something else coming out next week, whatever. See you, Alister, bye. And you're supposed to just go away kind of, to a degree. And I've heard that before. And I actually seen an interview recently with Rob Zombie, where he talked about when he remade Halloween, and he tells a story. I think it's on Howie Mandel's podcast, and he said, the morning that the movie came out, he got a phone call from Harvey Weinstein at like 10 a.m. and he was like, "See, Rob, I told you it's a fucking disaster. It's not going to make any money. The projections are awful, blah blah." And he was like, and then like 6 hours later, I get a phone call and they're telling me I'm a genius and we have to shoot 2 more sequels and we have to this and do that. And he was like, and then by Monday, it was like nobody was answering the phone anymore.
Yeah, man, that's what it is. It's a roller coaster, and it's super stressful. Meeting Jim and going to Avatar and the set in New Zealand, and it's just so thrilling. And then I worked with the producer Andrew on the script, for 6 months, and the writer John, and we really had it singing. And then I moved my family to Queensland, pardon me, from where we were at the time in Melbourne, and in Sydney. Sorry, then you live like a gypsy. I don't even know where I'm from anymore. And we're ready to go, and we start production. And then the producer, one of the American producer, came in one day to my office and said, look, we're going to shut everything down. There's an issue, there's an illegal issue, we're going to sort out the IP and blah, blah. So then we went on hiatus for a year. Not quite a year, about 10 months, 8 or 9 months. And it's hiatus, when a producer ever says the word hiatus to you, it usually means dead. It's done. It's never
not to cut you off there, but what happens to you in those 10 months? Like, what are you expected to do? Just sit and wait and see what happens?
Well, that's a very good question, and I didn't know myself, because this was a first for me. We'd moved the family. It's like, it's one of those hard things. It's very hard to for me to go out and get jobs, for example. Like, what do I do? I can only actually do one thing, which is really directing movies. Pull beers. I used to work in a pub for years when I was at uni and stuff like that. So I can pull beers or direct movies. It's like, they're kind of, a fair way apart. And so we were like, well, I just had a lot of faith that because Jim was involved, and I knew the tenacity of the Australian producer, that it was going to happen. And I had a lot of faith that I just had to hang in there and they'll get it back on track. And sure enough, they did. So I just spent the time as productively as I could just preparing for the picture. So I actually taught myself a whole bunch of things, which I still use today. For example, I can do really basic 3D modeling in an app called SketchUp, which you might be familiar with. It's like, people often use it it's a Google product. Another story. It's a Google product. And people do things like build, the crazy people build like, a version of the Colosseum, for example, and they can geolocate it onto Google Earth and stuff like that. But they've got this amazing facility to, now you can kind of download animation apps and various things and use, so that I could actually build little animatics and go. So for our major set piece stunt sequences, I actually designed, and built myself, like a fly through of the whole cave system, and little animatics of all of our major set pieces. I mean, they were pretty crap, but they were good in a way that, as a conversation started with your team, whether it be the DP or the designer or the producers or whoever, that you kind of go, oh, this is how I see it. We're going to be here and here's there, and that's going to go like that, and the space looks a bit like this, and blah blah blah, and pre-viz and all that concept stuff is just like hugely important. The bigger the film is, the more important. Even the small films, it's vitally important. Like the thing I'm doing at the moment now, I'm working with a concept artist and storyboard artist, just so that we can sit down in pre-production and go, these are the green screens, these are in camera, this is how we do this. And so you have a battle plan, but also it means you can budget properly. So even on the big massive ones, the bigger they are, I can guarantee you Avatar. I don't have to guarantee, because I know it's sort of like those movies, when you're spending a couple $100 million on a movie to make them, in Avatar's case, God knows how much that costs. They're going to spend $10 million in R&D on the picture, basically. You're going to spend, $5 million over 2 years basically shooting the picture, so that everyone knows what the camera is doing, where it is, what even the lens is. You know what I mean? It's not, and guarantee you, Jim is not improvising on the day, going, oh, do I use the 35 or the 50? Does the camera here, or is it there? Am I hand holding this, or am I? It's sort of like, I mean, he'd think it all through, and he's a genuine natural filmmaker, so he would be intuitively working with what's in front of him, like a good rugby player. But it's planned out to the frame, and that's what you're trying to do. Again, I've forgotten how I went down this path.
When you mention, having the bones of a year, and I suppose, you could have taken the route of like, I'm on this big picture, and yeah, I'll just chill or whatever. And you said kind of, I suppose, really digging into all the different aspects and kind of self-teaching stuff like that. And Jim feels like somebody like that as well, who's quite curious creatively in all aspects. Would you say that's a huge key to, I don't know, evolving and kind of I don't want to say staying relevant, but like that curiosity to always like, you know, want to know more and like the need for more?
I think so. I think definitely for me, I mean, obviously everyone's different, every filmmaker's different, and sometimes I look at people's stuff and I marvel at some people's films and go, where did that come from? How did you even think like that? And when you look at some technical stuff too, it really bugs me when I go and watch a movie and I go, how the fuck did you do that? And then you have to kind of work it all backwards and go, oh, okay, maybe from I don't know, all that sort of stuff. And there's some people who are, I think I mean, it's sort of interesting. I mean, I'm learning all the time as a filmmaker, and I still don't think I've made my kind of opus yet. I hope not.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's still ahead of me. It's not worth getting up in the morning if I didn't think so. I don't quite know what it is. I've got a film that I really want to make, which is a comedy thriller, but set in a kind of a horror environment. So in a lot of ways similar to Bloody Hell.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a really fascinating kind of existential psychological study. It's got a sort of a Jungian kind of thing bubbling underneath and all sorts of strange and bizarre shit that I think would make a really great movie. It's just I'm finding it really hard to convince other people that it will. Which is another project that came to me out of Canada from Bloody Hell. So I don't think I'm quite the filmmaker that I want to be. Some filmmakers I think are really lucky that because I would love to do more drama than I'm doing, just straight drama, straight historical drama, for example. I love Ridley and Spielberg. I'm a classical sort of stylist, so I like those classical style, the older guys, because I'm a bit older school, I suppose. And I'd love to be able to stretch out a little more. I mean, having said that, I've been lucky enough. I've made a couple of war movies. I've made a sports movie, an action adventure movie, and that sort of comedy horror. All my shorts were comedies. But I'd love to do a bit more straight drama, and I love sometimes the sensibility of people, which is very different to me. And I don't imagine them being technically interested, for example. I was looking at who's the Canadian who passed away recently? Wonderful director, Twin Peaks, David Lynch.
David Lynch.
And he's a really fascinating character because there's not, I think, any portion of his brain devoted to analytics. I think it's like, there's no right, no, there's no left side. Is it left side that's Matt's? And he's just pure kind of moment, and I was watching, when he passed, I got a bit obsessed by him, and I was sort of watching a lot of videos and, and I saw a really interesting one, which I thought was indicative, and it was him having an argument with his producers, and I don't know where this footage came from, and he was getting really angry with them because that, like as producers do, they're like, well, look, we've only got 2 days in Toronto and you've only got 1 day in this location. We've only got half a day to shoot, these 2 scenes. And he's like, and he's just getting absolutely irate because he's trying to explain to them, you don't understand, like, I need time because it's when you're in the space and with the actors and time is not a consequence and you don't have those pressures on you. That's when the magic happens. Those were his words. That's when the magic happens. And I thought that's really interesting, and that's so David Lynch too, because there's some very strange quality to his movies that it's very hard to put your finger on. It's like Malick, it's that kind of, or Russian filmmaker, name escaped me. It'll come to me. And they have that magic ability of Tarkovsky. They can sit in the space and somehow the relationship of time in reality to the temporal changes that happen being recorded through the CNOI and all this kind of stuff. You know, I'm going back to film school here. You know what I'm talking about, and there's an intangible, and so in a way, those guys like your Lynches plan for the intangibles, you know, and then if they're not accorded the opportunity for the intangibles, then they're just recording shit, you know. And this is the battle. I mean, this is the real battle for me working in my space too. It's the same, very, very different, because we're sort of, I'm much more driven by visual narrative and the efficacy of how limited I need to be able to hold someone's attention, and the speed with which things have to move in order to kind of do that. There's sort of there's different competing ideas there, but I kind of envy that idea. I kind of like the idea. I'm not sure if I'd be good at it, but I like the idea of, you know, being able to do a Tarkovsky and just do the, you know, just to be able to sit. Steve McQueen, he loves to just sit there to the point you kind of go, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Come on, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a different matter.
I think as well, it's probably underplayed the definitely like the mental, emotional, and maybe I would imagine eventually the physical toll it takes to be a filmmaker. I mean, the idea of you know, it's essentially freelance. There's no real, you know, it's not like someone talks to me like about the quote unquote like golden era of Hollywood where they would sign somebody. They would say, "Oh, Alister, we liked your couple of pictures, whatever. We're going to give you a 5-picture deal with us." Or an actor would get a, you know, a 3-picture deal or whatever, and they were signed to the studio, and you were kind of, at least for a certain amount of time, unless anything went wildly wrong, you were kind of guaranteed, okay, well, I know this is kind of where I'm at. Whereas aside from all the creative aspects, I suppose you guys have all this other shit to worry about where, you know, you mentioned convincing people about a script that you're really passionate about. And then the skill of having to be able to pitch that and kind of convey your idea to somebody maybe who's not as creatively minded, who's thinking about analytics, who's thinking about the financial side, or, you know, their why will be completely different from your why. And then obviously all the personal stuff in the background where it's like, okay, well, you know, we're making this movie, I'm getting X amount of money, and then I'm not sure when the next project is going to pick up, and having to allow for all that. Is that something that just, it just takes trial by fire to kind of get used to that little bit of maybe that small bit of uncertainty, or like not knowing where the cards will fall?
Well, you've kind of described my life. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. You've got to have a fairly strong, you know, probably delusional would be the best. Delusional, egotistical, you know, stature or something. I don't know. It's not easy. It's really hard. It's true. You're absolutely right. Look. I mean, some people, you know, there's definitely the lucky few, talented lucky few, and not trying to talk anyone down or whatever, who get those great opportunities, and you know, like a Baz Luhrmann, for example, you know, who I think is a really great impresario. And I'm not sure what his arrangements are, but he essentially has a deal, so it's a bit almost old school.
Yeah.
You know, certainly like have the first look arrangements, and certainly I suspect studios are funding his development costs, you know, so that which is a big deal. So he doesn't have to worry about pulling beers at the pub. You know, I don't really have an answer beyond saying that, yeah, it's pretty scary, and life comes at you fast, and you know, we're in a situation at the moment where, you know, I've been attached to a project for over 6 months, and they've been paying me to actually be attached to the project, but I'm not doing it. So I'm in that same situation where, well, I'm kind of hooked. I'm sort of on the hook, but I can't go and actually earn money anywhere else. So, I mean, I'm developing the picture, and I'm working on the screenplay, and working with concept artists and stuff like that, and that's great. But, you if when this movie's done, I'll be back starting again from scratch. Trying to get continuity of work is really hard. It's really tricky, and I've never really succeeded doing it. And that I'd always thought that I'd be able to go do a film and then do some television, some advertising, documentary or whatever it is, and then the next film, and that way kind of like, but the environment's changed so much. It's actually really hard to move between spaces the way that it used to be, much easier. And advertising guys tend to do all of the TVCs, and advertising agencies or production companies aren't interested in outsiders coming in because they've got their guys. It's the same with the advertising guys. It's usually very hard for them to get into filmmaking or television because it's the same kind of thing. It's like, well, you're a TVC guy. Can you do, doing 30 seconds is one thing. Can you do 90 minutes? And some of them do very successfully, obviously. I don't know. It's just, I'm not sure if what I'm saying here. It's just like, yeah, it's tough. It's been really tough. I'm not going to lie to you. And I don't have a house. I can't imagine having a mortgage. I'm 55. We do okay. I've sent my kid to a really nice school, and he's just finished and he's been accepted into the National Acting Academy, which is nice. Although I much prefer him to be an engineer than an actor, but there you go. What do you do when you're predisposed towards a certain thing?
I don't know if you've had a chance to see Sinners that came out recently. Ryan Coogler's
No, I haven't, but I've been reading a little about it. So tell me about it. I don't really know much about it.
Yeah, well, I've seen it. I did enjoy it. It wasn't what I expected, but I was more kind of fascinated by, just to kind of follow on from what you said, in the fact that I think, I don't know if this is that big of a deal because obviously I'm not in the business of filmmaking, so it's a little bit lost on me to a degree. But I see everyone putting a lot of stock in the deal that Ryan Coogler managed to get out of Warner Brothers, where ownership reverts back to him after 20 years, I think, or 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets first dollar return. So something like, does he make money before the studio recoups what they get or something like that? And like everyone's making a big deal of it. Is that a good thing for, and I don't know if it's just sensationalist headlines where they're saying like, Hollywood execs are shook by the fact that he got this deal. And he came out now and said, look, I understand this is a kind of a once off. I'll probably never get this again, especially for like an original idea. This is probably never going to happen again. But like, does that help out the like filmmakers?
Look, I honestly don't know because I'm not across what that is. I mean, it's really hard. I don't even know the background to the film, who's paying for it, or what the budget was. So I can't even tell you that. I assumed it was an independent film, but because see, it's complex. So if you make an independent film, then normally what you're doing is you'll have a producer from a region who'll cobble together the budget, usually in a sort of almost like a co-production, but getting pre-sales from regions to get the money together, and then the multipliers through whatever tax rebates they can get. So if you can work out how to turn, for example, so in Australia, for example, if I can get $3 million of pre-sales on a project, and something like I'm attached to a sci-fi picture here, and it's about a $12 million budget, and the producer's convinced that he can get about 4 million US. Not going to say 12 million Australian, so about 4 million US in pre-sales because of the nature of it's a creature feature sci-fi. It has sort of tech elements, action adventure elements, survival elements. Obviously, there's going to have to be star attach or stars to sort of to beat up the kind of value, but he reckons he can get the pre-sales on it that pretty much, combined with the rebates that we get through the national tax system, plus the kind of in-kind co-investment from the state bodies that we shoot it in, that we can get that money together without any equity. So that's actually, so you can actually finance a picture based on pre-sales alone, not actually any equity. So you don't need, Elon Musk to go, hey, here's $10 million, go and make your picture. Okay, so however, all of that whole system is this sort of house of cards. You've got all of these balls in the air, and as soon as one ball disappears because the pre-sale in Czechoslovakia falls over, then suddenly you're, you know, $500,000 short on your budget, and then Thailand gets nervous, and, you know, and Germany and all this sort of stuff. Just bear with me for 2 seconds. Sorry, my son is calling me.
Yeah, you're okay.
From Sydney. Anyway, it's a house of cards. Whereas a studio, the whole structure is different. If they go, here's $10 million to make your picture, then really you can convert that $10 million into $20 million by just keeping on shooting. Because once they're in, they're all in. And this is the great lesson that I learned from James Cameron in a way, although he has a very bad reputation for being a kind of irresponsible filmmaker. He's actually a very responsible filmmaker. He's just very ambitious and has a giant vision and a perfectionist. But he was very much like, look, mate, it's very different from me making my picture. I had a line in the sand. I could not get one more dollar out of it because of all the deals tying up the territories and the investments and the distribution deals and so on and so forth. You can't add equity into a picture. But in a studio picture, you can, because the studio is providing the equity, so they can keep, you know, spending it. How you kind of get the dollars at the end of that, I don't know. And I'd find it, I don't know enough of the background of the filmmaker to know how you could get leverage for it. I mean, he might have great representation and great lawyers. I just can't imagine how off the page any studio executive would go, you know, oh, that's, you know, that film's a winner, you know, or because no one knows. It's
Yeah.
You know, the history of film is the history of people who've had an opportunity to invest in something. They go, oh, well, I don't know, whatever, it might be good, might not be good. You know, George Lucas, by way of example, talking of Revenge of the Sith or whatever it is, you know, no one believed at all in any of that stuff. So he was able to then leverage their lack of belief to get ownership. Nowadays, though, they're so savvy, the studios. I just don't know. I just don't know the arrangements. When I had on Sanctum, I had multiple deals with producers, including Jim, to get small fractions of stuff. And even though the film made a lot of money, but I'm here to tell you, you know, it's not in my pocket. It's in the pockets of those that put it all together.
Yeah, I think people assume that as well. So I was just, when you were talking there, I was just having a look. So supposedly, and this is the online version, so it's obviously like, you know, I don't know if the truth lies somewhere in this, but he had been working on the picture. It was in development through his own production company, Proximity Media, with Michael B. Jordan was cast as the lead role. He was using that supposedly as like a bartering tool because he's a big name. Then Sony, Warner Brothers, and Universal were in a bidding war to acquire all rights. They were looking for a budget of 90 million to make the movie. And then supposedly those three companies were that interested in it that in exchange for agreeing to it, Warner Brothers gave Coogler first dollar gross, which is when the filmmaker receives a percentage of the gross box office revenue, starting from the film's first day of release. This is a sharing in the revenue from ticket sales, and they don't wait until the studio turns a profit first. So it's from the day it comes out, he gets.
I've never heard that. Even James Cameron doesn't have that deal.
So he got that. He got final cut privilege, and he gets ownership of the film 25 years after its release, all of which was granted by Warner Brothers, who offered him $90 million budget in return.
Look, there's a whole bunch of figures there you're throwing at me that blow my mind. I mean, the fact that it's a $90 million film. Again, I know nothing about the filmmaker, and I don't know about Michael Jordan, except the basketball.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Different. I don't understand how anyone can spend $90 million on a film. And again, I know nothing of the film and I haven't seen it, so you might be able to tell me if there's $90 million worth of film up there. But that alone is bizarre, because his fee for directing the film would have been several, and producing it and writing it or whatever it is, would have been millions and millions of dollars anyway, let alone getting. The only thing I can think of is that people sitting around going, for a $90 million film to make a profit, it's going to have to turn over $300 million, probably in North America. forget about the rest of the world, because you sell off the rest of the world, again, without knowing what the studio is and what its arrangements are. But so when you go, there are very few films that make $300 million. I mean, you've got to release on 3,000 screens and stuff like that in North America. And it's now, interesting enough, that kind of, because it's an African American film, isn't it?
And it's strange as well, because they give him the idea it's kind of like horror mixed with like folklore, and it's set in like the Jim Crow era in America, and
Right.
he's coming with a background of the Creed movies and Black Panther, which is kind of like
Right.
a little bit of a strange, like, it seems like a little bit of a, like, let's throw shit at the wall and let's just hope this works out. Now, I know so far it's made 122 million in North America and 162 million globally. I don't know if that's like good per se. Like, everyone seems to be saying it's great. I did enjoy it, but it just seems wild to me that somehow somebody managed to agree and say, yeah, we'll give you all that money.
Well, I would think of it in these terms. And it's interesting because, of course, I hadn't made the connection. Sorry, with the Creed movies and all that shit. So, firstly, you got that, that Black weekend, that opening weekend. Like, I think basically the only people who can open movies now are Black movie stars, and even Will Smith has sort of gone, but that's still a thing. And if you can open big in America, you can do big numbers. So that's a big deal. And that whole Creed thing, I would say, and this is where I was going, is that Hollywood is a lot like New York. It's America, but a lot like New York. It's a market town, and so what happens is people just get this heat, and it's like a buying frenzy on Wall Street. It's like this is the hot stock, and there mightn't be any logic or reason to it, but suddenly the phones ring, and it's like, it's my mate. Oh, everyone's all in on fucking Washington. Everyone, and then suddenly it creates its own momentum, and I suspect he's been able to engineer that around the hype of, I'm this guy, look, and I've got, this actor attached, and we're going to do this, and this is how it's going to work. And I'd just say he's created a kind of a big energy around it, and people see him as a winner and want to back him. And so that's how it's kind of like, and you can see that, and this is this weird thing about corporations. It's completely outside of my experience, so I can only guess and do it anecdotally, but I can easily see boards sitting around going, well, we can't let Warner Brothers have this. We can't let Universal have this. Yeah. It's kind of like, we need to have this. What's our tent pole for, for winter? What are we releasing in, what are we now? April, like, what are we competing with? Well, we've got the Rocky 72, and we've got this coming out, and we've got Star Wars 85. All right, well, okay. This is sort of counter programming against the thing. We've got Black, and then just that energy, and he's obviously built that hype. Like, I've really noticed it, for example, in my X feed, how much coverage, that is obviously astroturfing about it all, but it's sort of like I suspect that the filmmakers have been very, very, very savvy from the bottom floor, setting the whole thing up. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see it, but I'm not really. I get the feeling I'll be very disappointed. Because, I'm usually disappointed in films.
And that's kind of what I think. The only reason I probably wasn't is because I had seen it right when it came out, and everybody hadn't been like shitting on about it as much yet. And like since then, everyone's been going crazy about it. And I think you might be right. There's a degree of that, and it's that thing now as well. I think studios like to do that thing where it's like, we've got our movie with like nearly an all black cast, and like it throws back to like, African American culture, and there's like Irish folklore in there, and we've got all these different like, it's
African American Irish people.
Yeah, it's a really like weird mix of, but I think maybe they might have like, I don't know, like cashed in on that kind of like culture thing. And like, obviously maybe the studio saw something in that and went, you know what, actually, this'll work really well in marketing.
I don't know. The studios have been wrong so many times. They've been wrong more times than right in the last, 20 years, and getting worse, as we know, with the death of Disney and, your Kennedys and all those people who've just been driving those studio things into the ground. I don't think they know anything. I think the strange thing is, because they're risk averse, fundamentally it's driven by fear of failure, not desire for success.
Mm.
So there's a whole different sort of mentality, and I think, if you're an executive, you're fighting always to keep your job, and to climb the greasy pole. So you always aspire to your boss's job, and so you do everything you can to undermine them and make you look good and them look bad. I mean, it's a really dog eat dog kind of nasty place.
Do you think, like, going forward, where will that creativity live? Is it in the kind of indie space, as in, like, I seen a book recently. I was in a bookshop and I seen it was like the death of the action movie star or whatever, and I just read the back of the book, and it's a kind of a concept I never really thought of. I remember, even in the 90s, people would see movies because of the action star, whether it be Schwarzenegger or, somebody like Van Damme or Jackie Chan or something. And we don't really have that now. Like, we've got The Rock, and outside of that, like, I don't know if there's any massive amount of, and even at that, it's like, Fast and Furious 10. It's like, I'm not sure at what point, like, we kind of stop cashing in on the IP, but that, again, it probably ties into that risk averse, like, well, you know what? It's probably better to put like 50 million into Fast and Furious 10 than it is to put, 25 million into an original, or, a new concept. But like, where do you think that creative, like, that, I don't know if I want to call it like the golden era of filmmaking lives? Is it in the indie space? Will that end up over time, maybe, getting bigger and bigger and bigger?
Well, I think it always is anyway. I mean, it's no coincidence that usually if someone has a big indie hit, they get picked up by a studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
And quite often then it ends disastrously. The independent filmmaker then's making the $200 million Star Wars movie, but they're not equipped to deal with that world. And ultimately the world they're dealing with is the film is being made by the board and committees of people in the corporation. And I've only had a kind of a limited taste of that, but I can't imagine what it'd be like at that level. So the indie stuff drives everything. I mean, the challenge is, and it has always been thus. So maybe it hasn't changed, but I think it is getting harder. It's just getting more and more expensive to make movies. Like, it's just ridiculous now how expensive it is. And so then things start coming in, like AI starts getting used as ways to try to save money. So then that starts to introduce a whole bunch of other ideas around, stories and narratives and things like that, and where really genuine good work comes from. I assume, my guess is in the future, things like, a lot of these sort of American police detective style, free-to-air series. What's what I'm thinking of? You know what I'm talking about. What's the one that has the music that goes chunk chunk? Law and Order. So
Yes.
So Law and Order, you can just get an AI can just write the script on that. So and then probably you might have a human kind of influencing it to put in the appropriately politically correct,
yes, give it the
kind of
parameters
villain.
of, like, yeah.
Exactly, and but then the AI spits out the script, and then the AI just actually casts it and shoots it and does it itself, because it's so driven by its structural kind of conceit. There's no, they're so undramatic. They're really kind of, they're shows that play in the background in people's lounge rooms. I can't imagine anyone sitting down going, "Oh, let's watch Law and Order," and sitting down and quick finish dinner and having a cup of tea and watching and leaning forward and going, "Wow." So that kind of stuff, I assume, machines will do, and humans, unfortunately, a lot of them will happily consume it. And that opens up all sorts of interesting questions about, not mind control, but what's the word I'm looking for? propaganda and
Mm-hmm.
and influence and all of those sorts of things, which exists now anyway. But that would be a fascinating thing, is who controls the machines, controls the people. Wow, I'm going sideways now. But independent film, so therefore I think it's going to be, hopefully be able to hold truths, and this is sort of going back to this original idea about digital versus analog. The truth is analog, I think. And I think that's what people will come back to. It wouldn't even surprise me if people started shooting on film again as a way of kind of actively separating themselves from the digital space, because they want to be truthful. They're trying to say, I'm being truthful. Maybe not. I mean, we know some filmmakers sort of still try to do that, Tarantino and so on. And although he's you know, I mean, it's a really interesting question. I don't really know the answer how it's going to evolve. But I think that fundamentally, as humans, we have a fundamental desire to need truthful narratives, because it's the only way that we can process the world that we live in, I think, without just losing our shit, in really simple terms. It's like it's a mental health thing, to going, I need to hear the story about, Zodic, who killed the yak, and then drank the blood and got stronger, and therefore saved his family from the marauding, Nulars. And so the Zodic clan has been rightfully elevated to a higher status, because we should aspire to, living as warriors in order to live as a people, or whatever it is, what I'm saying? Sort of like, I think so. So narrative functions in this way that prepares us to live and prepares us to die, which is probably its most important function, in a really interesting way. So yeah, analog is the truth. And I've been saying this to my son, who's as I say, has just gone off to drama school. I'm actually a big believer that in the future, I think theatre is going to become more and more important as a space, because in the future, everything you see on your screen is going to be lying to you. And so you're going to have to be working out what's truthful. Now, you can actively buy into the lie because you're going to go and see, a fictional film or whatever it is. But when what you're being told is truthful turns out to be a lie, and you lose all trust in institutions and the medium, where do you find truth? Well, you find it in an analog space, actually in a physical space, in the theatre, with other humans telling a story, and you're actually having a moment with them in that physical space. It's an analog space. And so that was part of my thing of thinking, well, maybe there is a future in acting, because it's not just this, purely digital world. There's actually these analog things, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if we start to see more and more storytellers, and certainly something I'd love to do. It's just tricky, that balance of just having to work, having to pay bills, having to survive, with your desire to do the things that you want to do. But I'd love to be doing a lot more analogy, and I try to do everything in camera as much as I can. Something like Bloody Hell, which I did, the character's limb is missing, and it's sort of like, well, you have to rely on a digital solution, but fundamentally that's only an aesthetic. You know what I mean? You don't want people drawn to that. It's about the character's dilemma and how he solves problems and deals with his situation, and how that affects and changes him, and so. Once again, I've just been crapping. You got to jump in.
No, it's great. It's fascinating, and the kind of every time you say something, I'm like, oh yeah, but I wonder about that, and I wonder about this. Is it difficult, from that standpoint, both professionally and personally, I suppose, that weird dynamic between having a lot of those thoughts and desires and wants, visions, I guess, so to speak, and then also, like you said, there's a degree of like the machine, the system, and it's like you get a phone call tomorrow and it's like, oh, Warner Brothers wants you to shoot a picture, and it's something that you're not that interested in, but they're going to give you a couple of $1 million, blah, blah, blah. But you're going to be, all those things you're super passionate about need to go on the sideline for X amount of time and whatever. Is that a weird balance? Because I know some people out there might say, oh, I would never do that. I would only shoot what what I love and blah blah blah. And it's funny again. I've heard Rob Zombie talk about this, where he was like, people always give me shit about my movies and stuff like that, and I would love to always make what I love to make, but also I remade Halloween because the number on the bottom line was huge, and I
Yeah.
also have to live and I need security. And a lot of times my music career is not so great, a lot of times my film career is not so great, and I've still got a mortgage, I've still got all this other shit
Yeah.
going on that no one cares about, only me. Is that like a difficult I suppose space to be in? It's like the trade-off between reality and then the delusion.
Um, to me, it's not a difficult space because I don't really have a choice. Like, I would love to be have much more freedom to do personal stuff, but I don't. I have to be driven by. So you try to have those things bubbling in a way, and then when you get a chance,
Yes.
you get to do them.
Yeah.
But no, man, you've got to live. We've all got to kind of work. I totally understand what he's talking about. It's sort of like I mean, it's not selling out. Like, who else sells out? Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't think of do you think of I don't know, like a plumber selling out? Oh, you're only doing high rises. You're not doing suburban homes. Like, I don't know, or vice versa. I don't know. Like, I don't. I mean, I would keep you saying I'll get offered $2 million. I'm there.
Yeah.
I was there at Hello. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I've never got a paycheck anywhere vaguely in that sort of space. So, is that me? Is that me or you, or is that just the system?
It could have been the system. We're back then,
all
I
right.
think.
I'm not sure when I lost you last. I was like saying what I aspire to is just to work. Like, I really love making movies. Like, I really, and it's hard to explain to people why I love it so much, but it's very rewarding. And I love collaborating with really good people. It's often really hard, like ridiculously hard. There's often just numbskulls and really bad humans, as there is in any line of work, and you battle through all that shit. It's very intense. It's very full on, but it's very rewarding, and when you can sit in the edit suite and you make a scene work, it's hard to explain. It's actually like it's religious. It's like it's religious, and I love that. And regardless of the space, whether it be an action movie or a sport movie or a straight drama, I love it. And so I would happily not make a cent if I could just work all the time, But my frustration is I don't work as much as I want to work. That's my frustration. So my personal ambition is to be able to just work more, not necessarily make a ton of money. That'd be nice. So I don't really have the luxury of that trade-off. After we made Sanctum, I was in a situation where I was sort of like, I didn't know what to do because my wife had just had a baby. Well, she had a baby when we made the first picture, and we were just like, do we want to live in America and raise our kids, in America? And we just decided that we didn't want to do that. So we stayed here. That's her in the background. Scott, don't come through the door. Sorry, that's the ghost in the background walking through. And we wanted to stay in Australia. And look, and it's probably cost me a lot in terms of my career, for want of a better term. But in terms of lifestyle, I mean, if you'd called me during the day, I could show you. I'm living on the Gold Coast. We live on the beach. We literally, the whole of our north and east view out our windows is the Pacific Ocean, and we couldn't afford that lifestyle anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so we feel very lucky and very blessed to be able to do that. And I don't have to grow. My kid doesn't have to grow up in LA, surrounded by
madness
and LA people and stuff, Yeah, I don't know. Although I'd love to. I'm a bit blown away now. You told me the budget on that film was $90 million because I'm going to be like, I don't know. It's like,
and you know what? I've been hearing this more and more where people are like, well, because I, as I'm sure most of the listeners, were always of the belief that if you're a filmmaker, a writer, any sort of creative, you're into film, TV, anything like that, the goal would be, oh yeah, well, you do what you got to do where you are, and then when the phone picks up, if you got the opportunity to go to the States or especially go to LA, that's just where you have to be, and that's it. And the amount of people now that I talk to in LA that are like, nah, man, no, I should have never came here, and if I had have known things would pan out the way they did, I would have stayed where I was, or I would have went and lived in Florida, or I would have went back home, or I would have stayed in the UK, and I would have just, when projects came up, I can go to the States and we can work, or go to Canada and do it, and then go back home. Do you feel like that's definitely becoming more of a thing?
I think so. I mean, interesting. So when I made Sanctum, it really, the sort of Zoom era didn't exist, and there was still sort of a video conferencing stuff, but as a cultural kind of idea, it was still very much, it had to be face to face. So there was that sort of sense of you had to be in the room. If you're an actor in particular, I think you've got to be in the room. You've got to be, because actors have to. It's fascinating because, of course, they want to get TV and screen work, so it's actually what they look like on screen. But being in the room is the most important thing for an actor, because the really good ones just have this. They're just glowing with charisma, and it's really hard to put your finger on unless you're in the room with them. Although sometimes I once was casting. I had a chance to cast one of the. One of the lesser Thors, and can't remember his name now. Which one was it? Chris? No, is Chris Thor? Is that one? No, what's the other one? Liam. Is that right?
You have me on that one.
So. The lesser Thor, but not the fully lesser Thor. Not the kind of dime store Thor. It's a bit harsh. God, I hope no one sees this. Is it Liam Hemsworth? He was in the Hunger Games, wasn't he? So he was. So we had.
Yeah, Chris is Thor.
Yes, and Liam's the young one. He was the one who was with Miley Cyrus.
Yeah.
So see, it's all coming back to me in my mushy brain. I did a test with him over it would have been Skype, I think. In fact, a tape might have been sent to me, I can't remember, when I was making Sanctum. And it was really interesting. And I was like, and he did this stuff, and I was like, wow, that kid is just fantastic. Like, he is just oozing with movie starness. Like, he is a real thing. It's hard to explain. It's like, it's a look, it's a feeling, it's a tone. It's really weird when you see it, and it's this magical thing. The problem was it wasn't right for my character, because we needed a character who was not fully formed, who was this sort of kid who was trying to find his way, because the whole point of the story in a way was that he matures through the process. Whereas if you cast someone who's already there, there's nowhere to go. That was my feeling. In retrospect, probably wasn't a good idea, but that's another discussion. But who knows? And you never know. You don't know shit in this stuff. What am I telling you? Where am I going? I'm just saying stuff now, just randomly. Living in LA, doing things. There was a reason for that.
Yeah, we were just talking about the concept of not having to do that as much anymore in the Zoom
the digital culture. Yeah. Well, so now there's no question now. There's a difference. I mean, all of my meetings are sort of Zooms and all that sort of stuff. It's not. I don't think that's an issue. I mean, having said that, I think doing time, being in the room is important. And I haven't been to LA for several years now. I haven't been doing the kind of pitching. I've been caught up with really just getting my kids through school and all that sort of stuff for the last 4 years, and the virus. So we were about to we were about to emigrate to Canada, because my wife is Canadian, and so I got my working papers, and so like, we'll go and live in Canada, and that way I can kind of commute to LA from Vancouver. That was the concept. And then the virus came and shut everything down, and we weren't allowed to leave the country. So we ended up moving to Queensland, which, if your viewers know, is sort of like northeast Australia, very tropical, as opposed to we're from Melbourne, which is sort of much more English, I suppose, for want of a better term, sort of cold and damp. So that's sort of how we got here. But so I've sort of been locked down for the last 6 years, but I'm sort of hoping now that he's finished school, and this new picture coming up is going to give me an opportunity to get back to LA and actually start and to get in the door and actually be able to pitch, to actually pitch face to face some stuff to producers and execs and all that kind of stuff, and build a bit more energy around that. And get, I used to be represented by CAA, which is a big, American agency. But again, it's sort of, if you're not in LA and able to do those face to faces, it sort of loses its momentum. So I'm hoping to kind of reinvigorate that over the next year or so.
How difficult is that, the idea of pitching? That comes up a lot, and it kind of gets glossed over. People say, oh, pitch, yeah, and I think a lot of people don't actually realize the concept of having to pitch, and then I suppose maybe in person versus on Zoom, like you mentioned earlier, making something like a lookbook. I think a lot of people think when you pitch, you just go in and say, hey, remember me? I'm the guy that made this movie, that movie, this movie, and I want to make a zombie war movie. And then they go, oh, great, perfect, Alister, no problem, we'll just sign the check. Off you go. And the difficulties, I guess, of having to be able to convey that idea and essentially convince somebody on first meeting this idea they've never heard of.
Not just one person, like tens of people. That's the thing. And look, even your Ridley Scotts and Baz Luhrmanns and whoever, everyone, you still have to be pitching. You still have to be bringing people with you, convincing people that what you're doing is the right thing. And you can never do enough. They want to see a singular vision around something. I mean, look, you hear all sorts of stories, and certainly in the looser days, and it still probably happens, I'm sure people just turn up and go, hey, I'm Ridley Scott, give me $20 million, I'm going to go and make this comedy about a cricketer in the south of France. Okay, for $20 million, that'll be fine. But fundamentally, you have to be, there's no doubt that, in a way, I never really kind of understood this when I sort of signed on to be a director. You actually have to be a writer first. You have to be writing. You have to own your own IP one way or another, whether it's a script or an outline or a story or a one pager, or you employ someone to do those things, that you own the IP. But you're developing it and you're taking it to people and you're creating that vision around what it is. The hardest thing about it, seems to me, the older I get, is it's such a dynamic cultural environment, so that as soon as you think you've got your finger on what is cool, what's in, what people want to see, it changes, and suddenly, there's a hit out of nowhere, and it's like, what's that about? And the other thing that's really hard too is the fragmentation in the marketplace. So, when I was a kid, going to the cinema at the RAF base, telling about that, there was a movie called Gallipoli made by Peter Weir, which is an Australian war movie, and it's a big influence on me. And it ran in Australia for 12 months. Like it ran in Australia for 12 months, that one movie in 1982 or something. It was a beloved movie and all those sorts of things. But nowadays, if you can get 6 weeks, you're a miracle worker. I mean, some of these big $200 million American studio pictures, tentpoles, only get 6 weeks. 6 weeks on your 2,500 screens, and then maybe another 4 weeks as they drop, because they've got so much content coming online, and it's all about that opening weekend and all about that. Again, I've lost my way. How did we start down this path?
I don't. That was probably my fault because I kept adding bits onto the questions. looking forward, then I get like so you mentioned,
Or
having to
what the
have that.
future's going to be, I think we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about having to be a writer, and that was something that I wanted to
Mm.
ask earlier about.
Pitching, that's what we're talking about. Sorry.
Yeah, like how important has that become to you to also, and I've heard this a lot as well, where people are like, what, I actually realized that I needed to have that in my tool belt to be able to write, or like you said, at least work with somebody and own the IP to a degree.
Not to a degree, you have to, full stop. So this is my advice to anyone who wants to be a filmmaker, as a producer or director. You have to own the IP. You have to. So if you can't option something, so if you don't have the money to option something that someone else is doing, and therefore owning the IP, you have to create it yourself. That's kind of it. There's no, you don't have any choice, because I mean, look, and of course there are exceptions. There's always exceptions, but no one is going to ask you to direct that movie written by someone else when you've never directed a movie before. Even if you've got a really nice short about, you made a, your high school graduating short, or your university graduating short, or whatever it is, it's just not going to happen because of the risk factor. So if I'm going to spend $10 million on a picture, why am I going to hire you to do it, who've never directed a picture, when I've got, say, Alister Grierson, who wants a job? I'll get him to do it. He's made 6 feature films.
Yeah.
And they're good, and they make money, and he has an audience, and so on. So I'll get him, because that takes the risk off me. Plus, it makes it easier for me to go to the marketplace. And here's the other thing that people don't quite understand. So in my situation, what happens is, producers contact me and say, because I'm mostly a gun for hire, and say, I've got this project. Are you interested in looking at? Yep, great. Send it through. Read the script. Okay, yep, I'm interested. What's the next stage? Right. Well, then we can do some rewrites. You can work with the writer, or it can be great, or whatever it is. We can take it to market. But the point is, the producers are just trying to put together a team of people that they can then go to the marketplace and say, right, here's the poster. It's got Jack the Ripper in the shadows, and it's got a knife dripping with blood, and there's the title over there, and then it's got the picture of the insert movie star de jour that we can afford for our $5 million film, $10 million film, whatever it is. Here's the poster. And so then straight away I can see, conceptually go, okay, in the market that we live in now, when people, basically this is going to be a streaming show, it's probably never going to be theatrical, depending on the tax arrangements behind the creation of it. So in Australia, for example, you have to have a theatrical release in order to get access to the rebate. It's a whole other discussion. Here's the poster. Here are the colors. Here's the font. Here's the actor. All right, is that actor attached? Not yet. Okay, fuck off. All right, so let's get on the phone to the agent. Right, we've got some interest. And so this is the producer will go, we've been talking to, such and such sales agent, and they're really interested in this. Probably got this great project. It's about Jack the Ripper, and but it's like a contemporary spin. And look, here's the poster, and we'd really love to get, Jeremy Blogs, to be our guy, and they'll be like, great, fantastic. What's the offer? And you go, well, if he gets attached, it'll be, we'll pay him X amount, because they'll be like, no, bugger off. You need to offer a pay or play. So now you're in this sort of catch-22 of going, I need to get that guy attached in order to get the sales agent, in order to get the pre-sale, to get the money to pay the actor. And if the movie doesn't get up, he gets paid anyway. So the balls all start launching in the air, and which lie did I tell, and all the kind of bullshit. Like, so it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. So the thing then is, if you're a newcomer to all of this, it's about owning as much of it as you can, because you'll always be elbowed out if people can, because it's about risk management. It's about being risk adverse. So getting started is the hardest thing. You almost have to write and own your first script, and that gives you the leverage to direct it. If people believe that you have a vision to do it, I don't know, man. It's so hard. it took me a long time, like, a long time. And I'd actually made, 7 films before I went to film school. And then I made another 7 films at film school, short films, all of varying budgets and formats and genres, mainly sort of comedies. And then the bizarre thing was, my brother walked. There's a very famous place in New Guinea where Australians fought the Japanese called Kokoda, and it's become almost like a spiritual journey for Australians of a certain type to kind of go to New Guinea and sort of walk along the track and through the jungle and go to all the various battlefields and all that sort of stuff, similar to some things in Europe and so on, obviously, which the Australians do too, of course. They all, and as I did as a teenager, walk through Belgium and France and then end up in Gallipoli and all these kind of amazing places that are part of definitive moments in Australian history. Anyway, and he walked this track, and I'd never heard of this Kokoda campaign before. So then he wrote me these amazing little diary entries about his experiences walking along the track and stuff like that, and some historical details. So then I started to dig into it, and then I became fascinated by it. Ended up buying, everything ever written about the campaign in Australia at that time. This is 20 years ago now, and I was just like, I've never heard of this. I bet no one in Australia's ever heard of this, really. If I've never heard of it, so I thought, well, then someone should make a movie about it. So I thought, well, that should be me. So then I was sort of like, okay, well, how do I do this? Because no one's going to give me like the money I need to make the real movie. I need $50 million, like minimum, to do this big, to do a big war epic thing and whatever the story is going to be. But to capture all of this stuff, because there's so many moving parts to it all. And then I was like, well, it's just not going to happen because I've never made a movie before. But someone might give me $1 million. I might be able to get $1 million. So if I can come up with a story that kind of captures the essence of what I think the experience was about. And this is kind of how I ended up in this kind of genre space in a strange way. So I was sort of like, well, the model became a combination of movies, but mostly Predator. For lots of reasons, but basically you get a small group of guys, they're in the jungle and they're being hunted by a superior kind of fighting force, and this is a true reflection of the Australian experience when you had these young militia guys who'd never been in war, never been trained, who shouldn't have been there, were fighting this very heavily trained, very experienced, very vicious Japanese military force. And totally literally outnumbered 10 to 1. And so you had a bunch of these kids who were shit scared, but tenacious and courageous, and and displayed all of these amazing skills that we kind of, in a very, I suppose, traditional masculine way. I don't know, whatever it is, kind of go, hey, that's cool. And so that was the story. I thought, so I'll do Predator. But instead of it being an alien, it's the Japanese, and we never see them, so I don't have to spend any money. We never see them because it's the Predator hiding in the jungle. And our guys are getting picked off one by one and sort of battling with disease and fatigue and the psychological ramifications of all of this, and and trying to have some little subplotty things going on. And that way, worst case scenario, me and a bunch of mates can go up to the bush, get a couple of credit cards, we'll shoot it on bloody high 8 handy cam, get a couple of guys, you know what I mean? And that was the vision. But then what I discovered was, as soon as you sort of take the vision to someone who has access to money, they go, that's fucking great. Let's do that. But let's not do it for $1 million. We'll do it for 2. And then the next guys are like, we'll do it for 3. And the next guys, we'll do it for 4. And in the end, I think it was about 3.6, which in 20 years ago was a bit more money than it is now. But anyway, so anyway, I hope that's useful to someone.
I love that concept of and I think it's something that maybe has been a little bit lost in more modern times, of reverse engineering the idea. So rather than, I think a lot of modern day society is very throwaway. So like you know, a roadblock comes up and they go, oh well, I guess fuck this, then that's that fucked. I can never try and do that. But the idea of, like you said, you know, originally in your head, the vision starts off as this, you know, $50 million war epic, like this amazing story, and you've got all these different shots, and then having to go, okay, well, I can't do that. That's just not possible. So, right, where can I go? Okay, I can make it for 1 million. Okay, but what if we don't see them? So there's another thing that I've kind of, you know, drawn lines out of, and having to work kind of backwards in a way to make it possible at all, like versus just being like, oh well, I have this idea, I wish I could make it, but it's going to cost 50 million. Oh well, just forget about it and just never make it. I think nowadays people are maybe a little bit more inclined to go, oh, it's, you know, it's just not possible, like it can't be done, there's no way to like possibly do this. um
I don't know. I mean, to me, in my experience, anyway, that is filmmaking.
yeah.
Filmmaking is compromise from start to finish, and it's trying to compromise the least amount that you can, and you're constantly solving problems. It's part of what's so stimulating about it is, you know, I will never forget the very first day, my very first big film, and you know, the first AD or whoever it was is driving me to the location, and we're shooting this river, and you know, out in the jungle somewhere, and the first thing is you turn up and you see all the trucks, and it's, you know, the circus, what we call the circus. It's like you know, the grips trucks and the gaffers trucks and all the support trucks, the makeup, the costume, you know, and it's all there, and you're like going, oh, wow, you know, I created this, like I started this madness, and all of these people are here because of me, and that's really kind of exciting. So then you turn up and you go, and then you start doing your day's work, and then suddenly you go, oh, we're shooting in a jungle. It's actually really quite difficult to shoot in a jungle because there are things like snakes and spiders and holes and rocks and trees and things that want to grab you. And so things start to slow down, and moving a light over there, and that's right. And it's actually really complex and technical. And then at about just after lunch, we're shooting a scene, and the first AD came to me and said, and I suspect he always knew this was going to happen, but kept it a secret from me. He just basically said, we don't have time today to shoot scene whatever it was, 25 or whatever it was. We can't shoot scene 25, and we're never coming back to this location. And it's the only location you can shoot that scene. And I was kind of devastated. I was sort of like, fuck, what? And then you realize, so, well, you've got no choice. You go, okay, so scene 25, it's a page and a half. All right, so that's about 90 seconds of material. What do I need from that scene? What's that scene about? Well, there's like 2 beats in that scene that really fundamentally matter. I mean, there might be some other beats, but they kind of just dig a bit deeper on character stuff that you've already established. But I need that beat, that bit of information there, and I need that thing about that character because that's going to play out, you know, in this scene later on. So I need to know that. Okay. So I've got these 2 things. So how can I, if I take those 2 things out of the scene, where can I put those 2 things so that the audience still gets that information and the narrative still works? And then you kind of, you know, you go, oh, you know what? I could put that one in scene 14 and that bit in scene, you know, 20, and I'll gift that bit of dialogue to this other character or whatever it is. And then suddenly, you know, you realize that you're just in this sort of, nothing is written in stone. Everything's dynamic. You know, if you understand fundamentally what it is that you're trying to do, you can pull pages from the script and adjust and deal with it. I think some filmmakers can't. I think a lot of filmmakers, and I know when I was in my early sort of filmmaking with my shorts, you know, you can't, when someone goes, we can't do that, and you go, no, you can't. What do you mean you can't do it? It's like, then the whole thing's fucked. It's like, it's never going to work. We can't, you know, and then, but you realize later, you're always dynamic like that. You're always learning, organic, changing. I think if you understand fundamentally the kind of core elements of what it is in the storytelling that you're doing, you know, you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's important for people to hear as well, you know, because there's a lot of aspiring writers, filmmakers, creatives that, and I will say the younger generation, we are inclined to, when there's roadblocks thrown up, you kind of do that. I think the first port of call is to be like, wow, the whole thing is fucked and I can't I can't do
You know,
any of it. I'm fucked. And you kind of focus on that one sole thing, like you said, rather than breaking it down and going, okay, right, I can't do that. Is there anything I can squeeze out of this and move on?
I had a couple of really great teachers at film school, and one of them was a guy called Les Parrott, who was a cinematographer teacher, and his big thing was how do you turn the negative into a positive? And he would just constantly go on about it, and you don't really know until you're kind of there. That's just part of filmmaking. There's no question. And interesting enough, someone else, I think it was a film director who was talking about this the other day, talking about it in their life. It might have been an actor, talking about how do you turn, Michael Caine, in fact it was talking about turning negatives into positives. And he's like, it's a life rule, is that when shit goes down, you have to try to work a way to reframe it, rethink it, and reprocess it, and turn that negative as best as you can into a positive. Otherwise you're not going to kind of survive. I think in life, there's too many, little nasty little traps there that can kind of catch you up. So filmmaking is the same. So it's been there's a couple of moments I was very proud of in that film, and dealing with that. And there's another moment later, and to me, in my own kind of egotistical way, I really felt like I can do this. And there was another scene where we're shooting, and it was in this sort of very narrow ravine, and we're shooting in it, and then the storm came in, and there was shit going everywhere, and water pouring off the rocks, and the actors were down the bottom. And so the first AD said, no, I'm pulling the it's too dangerous, we can't shoot. It's like, because time is just so, the only thing you've got, And so we all went back to the unit, and the unit was a series of tents, basically, out in the jungle. And I'm there and I go, fuck it. So I said to the props guys and the greenery guys, like, just build me in the mess tent where we're eating dinner. And at that time, we're middle of the night because we're shooting nights. It was our lunch, our dinner. It was like, just broom, half a dozen of these tables and build me a jungle in the tent, and I'm going to just keep shooting. And so I actually got the actors into this jungle that we built in this very small area, like no bigger than 3 or 4 meters square. But I could shoot close up, so I could get on 100mm lens, and get them, and box them up in the frame and get them sort of crawling through this sort of foliage in the jungle, and that way I could keep turning over through lunch and actually keep shooting the picture. And the first lady got kind of really pissed off with me because he wanted to call it a halt on the thing, and I was just like, but I can shoot this part I can shoot this much of the page, and then we can deal with whatever the ramifications of this afterwards. If I've got to get rid of the rest of the scene, or if I've got to pick up the scene in another location, at least I've got this stuff. And that's what we did, and the actors were, and it was one of those really exciting moments when, the actors are like, yeah, and they're pumped and primed and they're into it, and the crew and everyone's into it, and you're doing this stuff, and super cool. And I was like, yeah, Les would be proud of me.
Is that something as well that's important? I have 1 or 2 more questions before I let you go. Is that something else that's like important, do you think, to a degree, that everybody is kind of, I guess, as excited as each other about what they're doing, like, are as passionate in a sense? I find sometimes that it really comes across, when I look at something on screen, I feel like I can tell the difference between something that people actually cared about working on versus just being like, yeah, I'm this action guy or whatever I'm supposed to be, blah, blah, here's my lines. And even sometimes how it's shot, it seems very uninspired, versus I can tell, even if people say, oh, well, I didn't really like that movie, I feel like you can tell, though, the difference in when it's made by a filmmaker who actually cares.
For me, it is personally, just because I don't want to live my life. You hear these terrible stories about dictatorial directors or producers or whatever, or actors, worst, and just make everyone's life a nightmare, without mentioning names. And I don't want to live my life like that. I want people to really dig what I'm doing. And what I was very fortunate with my first movie, because it was an Australian historical kind of war movie. People were naturally motivated to kind of want to do their best, I think, and were really sort of inspired by the story and wanted to participate. And you're doing all the things. We don't have much money, but we're battling a whole bunch of stuff. And and I think mainly we had the cast and crew had a really great time. That shows in the final film for me, anyway. The interesting thing from what I discovered, and anecdotally, because I don't really know, because I've never had this experience. I've heard stories of films where they were just the most miserable experience of all time for cast or crew or both, that are masterpieces, that are recognised as, some of the greatest films ever made by people. And you're kind of going, and it's a bit of saying in the industry, if it's kind of easy, it's going to be shit. It's like, it's almost like conflict and tension creates its own dynamic. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I know I'm a fan of Clint Eastwood, for example, and I know he's a really chill dude, and he just wants his sets to be peaceful and calm, and most of his films are really terrific. So I would love to do what Clint Eastwood does. So I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I worked with an actor, big movies, the biggest movie star I've worked with on my little boxing film, and it was one of those weird situations where you're making a zero budget, and it's the smallest budget film I've ever made, and then this guy turns up, and his fee is sucking up, I think, literally half the budget of the film, and he's only going to work 4 days. I've got to shoot, and he's on like 50 pages. I've got to shoot 50 pages of material in 4 days. It's insane. And then go back and reshoot the movie without him, but with stand-ins and doubles and all that sort of stuff. This is a standard thing. I mean, that's absolutely the extreme end of things. But and he's an asshole. I mean, and maybe he's bought the right to be an asshole. I don't know. He's just like a, I'm not sure if he knows he's an asshole, but it's sort of like his ego and vanity and strangeness is so outside the realms of recognizing that there are other people in the room with him.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that person, because so recently he was on the UK version of Big Brother. I think, okay. And I think he pulled like one of the biggest fees that they've ever paid somebody. And he was kicked off the show he was nearly kicked off the show, I think, after 24 hours. And then like refused to, after signing all whatever contracts. I don't really buy into all that bullshit reality TV stuff, but it kind of feeds into what you're saying about, signs all the contracts, obviously agrees to whatever needs to be done, gets in there, does everything the opposite of what he's been asked to do, nearly gets kicked off it, says some very questionable things about other people in there, nearly starts a fight with some guy, says more questionable things, has like half the house like crying and like in uproar, and then ends up getting kicked off the show. And I think he's actually suing Channel 4 in the UK now, because they said whatever way their contracts are rigged up, if you get taken away, you only, like, if they'd have to take you off the show for breaking rules or saying things that you were asked not to say. So I think he's actually trying to sue them now for the money, because they said they're only going to pay half and stuff. So it kind of feeds into, obviously nothing has changed.
Look, it's a really fascinating experience. We could do a whole other show on this person and that,
I'd imagine,
the experience of making that movie, because it was fascinating and some hysterically funny stories.
Does that just come with the territory to a degree, like of being somebody of that, I don't know, like you said, for better or for worse, with that status level, maybe there's a level of like, I don't know, disconnection from fucking reality, to be like, yeah, I'm just like in a different planet.
I think there's no question. It's really interesting. And again, it's very hard to sort of not name names, but I was talking to David Michaud. Do you know David Michaud? Who's made some really great movies, Animal Kingdom, and my favorite movie, which is The King. Is it The King? With Chalamet Bing Bong, Timothy Chalamet. You seen that film? If you haven't seen that film, you have to see it. It's magnificent. It's one of my favorite films of all films. Anyway, So and we bumped into each other accidentally. Won't go into that. Anyway, I was talking about, so he's worked with some of these really crazy guys. And on one picture, and the king, by way of example, there was two guys who were supremely crazy, and but incredible talents and amazing actors, you know, and who just inhabit what they're doing, which is obviously part of their weirdness and craziness. And in the end, he was just like, and we're talking about this, and he was like, well, it is the price. Like, it is the price when you want those guys, if you're trying to make something, and it's gonna and it needs to have that magic. You've got to have the magic guys, and the magic guys sometimes fucking crazy, you know, and maybe that's why they're magic, you know. And this person who was in my film that we're talking about, I can't, let me just, I'll do one quick, I can't do the full anecdote. God, I can't. But the shortest version of it is, there was a scene that was like a 1-page scene, so like 1 minute scene, and it's the classic, you know, he is the kind of the mentor, and he's got to teach the young buck, you know, fucking pull your head in and get your shit together, and you know, believe in yourself, or whatever it is. And, you know, and so it was basically a 1-page monologue, you know, and I'd sort of designed a system where, you know, it's so hard to explain. He refused to do the dialogue as written in the script.
Of course.
So he was improvising the whole movie, which makes it very hard for the other actors who are not improvising the whole movie. That's a whole other story, as I say. So what I decided was, I'll write the monologue down on giant pieces of cardboard and put it on the ground. And this was at a boxing at a boxing gymnasium, you know, boxing ring. So if I'm shooting from over here, he can be over there, the piece of cardboard on the ground, he can see the text, and then just sort of, you know, riff on. Anyway, it's a longer story that involves a dog called Number One, and he comes in and improvises an 8 minutes. He basically improvises for 8 minutes a monologue about himself, basically. And me and the DP, we're in the kind of, to explain, he's kicked everyone out of the space. He doesn't want anyone in there. So it's just me and the DP and the cameraman and the boom swinging, you know, and the other actor, and he's just going for 8 minutes. And the trouble is, it's like all of the camera moves that I had blocked and planned, and the thing, and how I wanted to construct the scene, was I just thrown out the window. This 1 minute scene, he's doing an 8 minute monologue. And at the end of it, we're just sort of like, I mean, me and the DP, we lost our minds by that point, you know, we're just laughing hysterically now, hidden in our little tent, you know. Anyway, he leaves at the end of it, you know, imperiously. And, you know, we kind of give him a clap, oh, well done, you know, and just going, oh, God. So how do I deal with this image? Anyway, we go to edit the film and we cut it up. And the trouble is, the infuriating part is, the thing that angers me the most about it is, he's just got this magic quality, you know, and it's just, and the camera, even though he doesn't look like a normal person anymore, you know, he's just has this zing and spark and belief, and maybe because he's completely insane, I don't know. And so I was able to cut the 8 minutes down to 3, and, you know, it's this great scene. I mean, it's not what the scene was meant to be, and we had to adjust a whole bunch of things, and, you know, I mean, anyway, there's a whole bunch of stuff. The simple point of the story, forgive me for going on, is some of these guys have the magic dust, you know, and I think in the end, the industry preys on this magic, you know, it's a sort of a cocaine, you know, and if you can get your hands on that, and it's just there, you know,
it's fascinating. And even in a reality based show, you could tell. Like I think it came out afterwards that like Big Brother had like their biggest ratings in like however many years,
Right.
and it was all based around the episodes that he was on at the start, and all this stuff. And I suppose there's a and I don't know, like I was like I seen some of the clips of the show and I was like, is he acting right now? Or is this like how delusional he is? Like it seemed
His
like he was
whole
kind of,
life is an act. His
yeah,
whole
it's
life.
weird because like he was giving these like monologues to people that he just berated like 5 minutes before, and he's like telling about like his life and everything he went through, and like the level of like I'm not in our reality anymore. I've been taken so far out of it by like the system and the studio, and you kind of look at him and you go, you know what, I actually kind of feel sorry for, like, he's like an alien. And then like 5 minutes later, he's just doing something like just pure lunacy. And I'm like, I don't know which part of this is like you or not you. Um, I
I don't think
have
there
one.
is a part that's him anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry, just quickly on that. He's not. He's. I don't know. It's interesting to me because he was when I was a kid, and he was the biggest movie star in the world. That was kind of all part of the weirdness of being associated with it, and he has this magic sort of quality. I don't think once he entered into the zone of being this sort of superstar, then I think the narcissism that's inherent in him, I think, becomes pathologized, and
yeah,
so he's not a normal person anymore. That's my take on it.
yeah.
Like, he's an insane person. He was living in a car, very recently, until he got.
Yeah, very bizarre. And like even when he shows up on the show, and again, I'm there looking at him going, like, has someone told him to do this? Does he know, is this what's going to get him screen time? But like they all have double beds or whatever, and then he's like, no, I don't sleep in a bed. I'm going to sleep on the couch. I'm going to sleep on this like weird like sofa thing with like no pillows, and like the guy, like, he's a pretty big guy. This is a small like two-seater thing, and he's like bent up in this thing, and he's like has this like weird towel scarf thing that he carries around that he puts over his head. And it's just like loads of just really bizarre choices. And I'm like, I don't know if you're just like completely mentally just fucking gone, or like this is some weird act that's like trying to draw people in to look at it.
But both of the above,
Yeah.
without question. His whole life is a performance. Like, it's just fucking weird.
Um, just before, I have two quick fire things before I let you go, and I did want to touch on Bloody Hell because I don't know
Mhm.
what your perception is of it now, but a movie that's really well regarded by the horror community in particular. I think we're huge fans of like that crossover between like kind of comedy and horror, and they can be done when they're done like Bloody Hell was. They're like really well received by the community. How was working on that project for you, and have you felt any of that, I guess, since like the love it's gotten?
Look, it's the best fun movie to make of all the movies I made, without question. So Rob, who wrote the script, it's a long story, the sort of how it sort of came to me, but it sort of really fell into my lap. And I read the script and just went, I totally get this. It's a little different. The final film is structurally different to how it ended up. I always kind of thought, oh, there's going to be some issues, possibly some issues here, but I love the conceit. The sort of conceit was the film started in the third act, basically, and then it resolved itself at the start of the third act was the first act. And it was kind of like, oh, it's a really
Okay,
interesting
yeah.
conceit, but it didn't quite pull it off. And once we sort of shot it and cut it together, it was like, oh, it's just really, it's not quite. And I always sort of thought, oh, that's going to be really hard. I'm not sure if that's going to work, but the thing is, shoot it, and we can always unravel it and reconstruct it and work out where it's all going to land. That was my attitude. But the point was, it had a voice. So I don't know his name now, Rob Benjamin, which I'm not sure if that's exactly his name. He's a sort of mysterious fellow. The point was, his script just had a really strong voice, and it's really rare when you read those scripts that you go, wow, there's a really clear vision for this about what it can be. And I think that approached me. It's sort of interesting. It sort of came to me, this sort of American-Australian hybrid. And again, it was because of my genre background, working out of Queensland, tax reasons, and a whole bunch of stuff about how do we finance the picture. And the producer was able to go, well, if we do it in a certain way, we can do it for this kind of number, et cetera, et cetera. And it was super busy in Queensland. There was like very hard to get a crew together, and I was very lucky. The original DP that I'd asked to get involved ended up getting invited to go to Eastern Europe, talking about it earlier, to shoot a big film. And so he chose to do that, and then, which is great in a strange way, because then a guy called Brad Shields fell into my lap, who's this amazing DP, who was a second unit. You know, he would consider himself this, but his background recently has been working on these big films, like, you know, $200 million Disney or whatever, you know, things like you know, a King Kong versus Godzilla thing, working in the second unit. So he's doing these big action set pieces, you know, as the second unit DP. And he was really hungry, I think, to do a sort of a smaller film and be the lighting man. And so that was great. And he's just a terrific guy and funny, and you know, he's a surfer and very Australian and all these things. And you know, we Ben O'Toole was already cast when I came on, and he's just sublime. Like, he's just superb in this thing. You know, playing the two roles, and basically the conversations we had in the way before we got to pre-production were like, you need to get cut, because if anyone's going to believe that your character can do what he does, you need to you need to have prison body. That's what we kept talking about. You need prison body. So we got him onto a dietitian and a trainer, and he and his mate, and that's another story too, is another guy I'd worked with. We needed a body double, and I was like, we've got to get a body double, but he needs to be able to act, because Ben's going to be doing the two roles, and so I need to be able to do reverse angles with the same body type, but also an actor who can work with him, you know, actually to get a performance. I don't want to have just a body there and like the script girl kind of off screen just reading the lines, you know. And Ben had this mate who I'd worked with before in another movie. I'm now scrolling down trying to find his name. Josh Brennan. And Josh went out. So Josh and Ben both worked out together, went on the diet together, went on the workouts together, and they got hard, man. They got super hard, super cut. It was really cool. And the poor bastards through the whole shoot, you know, I'd watch them eating boiled chicken breasts, you know what I mean, and all this sort of stuff, because they were super committed. And Ben was just great. I mean, just a great guy to work with, and just the positive energy, you know. And we just had a really great time, you know. I mean, we went a little over budget, and you know, but whatever. There was a whole bunch of tricky things in there. The script had to, talking before about pulling pages out, changing scenes, adapting things. There's a bunch of stuff that's not in the film, which I really wish was in the film, but again, structurally it couldn't happen. There's a really cool scene in an internet cafe that never, you know, there's a bunch of scenes that never kind of made it. You know, and all the supporting cast, Trav, Jack, Meg Fraser's amazing. She was just so, you know, like we cast a really wide net, and she was just so super spot on. And we got all the actors had to learn all the finish, you know, to do it, and we're super into it. You know, obviously we got dialogue coaches and stuff like that, so I think what happened was we created an environment, and it all comes from Rob's script fundamentally. Everything always starts with the script, with, you know, and that was that it had a clear vision about what it wanted to be, and then we just kind of joined the dots on how to make that happen, and just create a really nice energy around it, and taking it super seriously. And this is one of the interesting things about comedy, you know. As soon as you start laughing at the jokes, you're in trouble. You've got to, you really have to be very kind of serious about the comedy, and how all that sort of stuff works. It's, you know, and then there's a whole discovery process in the editing as well. But Ben had, I think, a really great really great sense of timing with some of this stuff. The great thing again is the edit. Often you can kind of just, it's amazing how just a couple of frames later in the cut elevates the gag, and it just pops, and all that stuff. But like, that's my Spaceman. I love that shit, and doing with the, like, I think we did a really great job with a very limited budget in dealing with the CGI elements and not just resorting to that. We had all of these very clever in-camera techniques where, I could get Ben to kind of double around Josh, and then reappear behind himself and stuff like that, and then only have a very limited amount of CGI or whatever it is, and trying to come up with these techniques, and even just great things like the armor is coming up with this great Jack, the uncle character, gets a knife in the side of his head, like through his ear at one point, and so the special effects people, props people in cahoots, came up with this foam knife handle, so it's completely lightweight, like it weighs less than a gram, what I mean, so that you can actually just literally, and they molded it to fit into Jack's ear so that it just fit in there, so he could just this knife handle out, made of foam but look photorealistic, kind of, and stuff like that, so, and all of these great solutions, like the golf ball rolling out of the golf bag and then coming across to the foot and so on. And Rob had been very specific in his script about certain gags, like the golf ball rolling across the floor and revealing the fact that there's only 1 foot and not 2 and stuff like that. And it was just a script just full of energy, and I think we cast really well. I'm super proud of it. There's a couple of versions of the picture. One day there might be a director's cut. I just need to find a couple of $1 million to do another version. But a film I'm super proud of. I think Ben is amazing. I think Rob's script is incredible. All the cast, just such a great experience making it. I'd love if every film could be that experience. It'd be, yeah,
it definitely comes across on screen, and I think that's definitely why the community probably got so behind it. And I think it's one of those ones that year on year it's going to like continue to grow that cult following. I really do think so. I have a couple
just for Ben. Sorry, just on that, just for Ben, because when I was working with Ben, I was going, man, you're really good. Like, you're really good. Like just oozing with talent and charisma and all that sort of stuff, and so totally committed. Like, I've never worked with an actor before. Pretty much for half that movie, Ben, because he's in this distraught situation, he's hanging from this rope and he's got a leg off and he's just in this terrible situation. So before we do every take, he'd get a paddle pop stick and stick it down his throat to the point of vomiting, and that would just bring the blood up to his face and his eyeballs, and he'd be like, oh, okay, and then we'd roll the camera and he'd be like, all this sort of shit. It's like, dude, you're committed. It was super cool,
That is commitment.
And I just think he's a star. I honestly think he's a superstar, and I'd love to see him get more stuff. It's hard to break it. He did a movie in America with Catherine Bigelow, but it was a big ensemble piece. I don't think he didn't kind of quite pop. I think he's just not quite had the thing. And I really hope that this will be the movie to pop him. And I'd love to see Meg. I'd love to see all of them do stuff. I'm looking at all the names now on my second screen. Meg's she's just a sweetheart. She's just the young girl. She's just gorgeous and just a lovely person, and super, super talented. And I'd love to see her do more stuff. Anyway, sorry. There we go.
Yeah, no,
I'm being
you're
nostalgic.
Because it's a great movie, and I think it comes across. And just from hearing you talk so fondly about it, I think that really conveys when you see the finished movie would have no context, and then if you were to hear that afterwards, you're like, now it makes sense why it felt so kind of lived in and enjoyable, because there's real passion behind it. Do you have anything that you would consider like a comfort movie, or something that you would find yourself rewatching? I don't mean every year even, but like maybe a movie or movies that stand out that you're like, yeah, I do kind of revisit that more often than others.
Oh, there's a bunch of them, and it's all very eclectic. My son, is a bit of a movie buff, and he, has his list of films that we used to watch over and over again, and influence from me and influence from his mother, who I'd met at film school. So it's a real kind of filmy family, I suppose. Blade Runner for me will always be just. I think the original Blade Runner, that is, the second one's not so bad, but I don't know. There's something magical about it that's really hard to put your finger on. It's such a weird accident of fate, and it's, again, a fascinating thing. That's one of those films we were like talking about before, where there was the tension between the director and the actor is explosive, and yet they've made this thing. I'll watch Master and Commander every year till the day I die. That's it. So Peter Weir is probably my guy. Like, when I go, if I could ever be a film director, I'd want to be Peter Weir. But I'm a strange sort of hybrid. I think, a John Carpenter come sort of Peter Weir-esque aspirant. I don't even know what that even means, but there's a bunch of Ridley Scott ones, but the Gladiator is my son's favorite movie, and it's one of his sort of dad movies. We're a bit sort of on the nose, I suppose. What's my wife calls them brown movies. We love brown movies. And Shawshank Redemption. I mean, they're all very what's the term? Masculine and brown and nostalgic, and probably all the things that aren't good art, but kind of make you believe that it's worthwhile existing, that humans can be honourable.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
That there's bigger powers at work or something. Those kinds of things. But it's eclectic. I mean, there's a whole bunch of strange. I'm showing my age with some of these. I can't even think of recent ones.
Is it hard for you to turn off that creative brain? When I know, like, obviously when you're knee deep in projects stuff, it's different. But like, on a day-to-day basis, is it difficult? Like, I hear a lot of times from filmmakers and creatives, sometimes like the difficulties with, maybe you sit down for dinner, or you're supposed to be on a date, or you're supposed to be doing something, and it's like, it's just, that's in the background and it's just constantly going, and you find it kind of hard to detach from that.
I think it's sort of built into who you are. I'm certainly don't think any. Well, I don't know how other people live their lives, so I can't kind of comment, if you know what I mean, about what people think and what they do, and because sort of, I don't really think of myself as creative, but it's not until I sort of meet other people that I realize, oh, okay, I am actually a little bit different to you.
Yeah.
And I suppose in how you're framing what you're seeing or thinking about things, or something. I mean, I find it, it's just really stimulating to be thinking outside the box, if that's what creative is, or finding ways to do things. I mean, it is my fundamental, so this project I'm attached to at the moment, part of I get anxiety about it is because you want it to be the best movie that you can do. You want to do the best that you can, and I'm just constantly going, oh God, we can't do it. We don't have enough money to do that. How am I going to do that scene? How do I get him from there to there? And we can't afford that. I can't do the green. And so then, and then I get really stressed and anxious about trying to solve these problems, which are sort of a combination of creative problems, budget problems, or whatever it is. Like, that's what gives me the sweats when I wake up in the morning going, oh, I don't know how to do that. More than, I mean, Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know. What another weird thing about being a director is you don't really meet many other directors.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what people do or how they do it. Like, you don't go into other people's sets and hear them. And people get really weird if you turn up on their set. I've done it a few times to people. They get really weirded out when you kind of, turn up on their set.
Mm.
And you sort of, because I'm fascinated, like, how do you direct people? What do you say to people? How do you deal with this issue? How do you, what do you say to the lighting guy? How do you set things up? And whenever I've tried to have these conversations with other directors, everyone gets a bit kind of like, because I think everyone's the same. I'd be like, oh, I don't really know. I just kind of do what I do. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird business, man. I don't recommend it to anyone, honestly. Unless you've got real, real, it's just easier ways to make a living. That's for sure.
Um,
Like when you're
for people,
rolling, it's very stimulating, but like it's
yeah, the rest of it, yeah, I can kind of
yeah.
gather. Um, for people, who either have followed your work up until this point, or maybe from listening to this now want to dive back in, is there a place that you could direct people like as the best for maybe keeping up to date with what you might have coming next?
Oh shit! Now you put me on the spot. Not really. I don't. I've been terrible with like social media. I'm just terrible at any of that stuff, and that may be a great explanation for things. But I'm hoping we get to make this movie in Malta. And I'm adamant. I'm going to really try this time to get like a social media person to do social media stuff. I don't even know
Mm.
what it is. I don't even know how it works. God, so I'm just not used to it. I must sound like the most ridiculous fuddy-duddy.
It's
But
funny, you're not,
I
because
apologize.
I always ask this because I don't like to assume, because obviously I've already like, done the research as regards like an online presence and whatever, but I don't like to assume in case somebody's like, well, no, I'm going to create a new page, or I'm going to make a website or whatever. And that's why I always ask. And every time I get the exact same response, which I think is kind of lost on people, because, the younger generation are like, what do you mean you don't sit on social media all day, every day and post everything about your life and what you had for dinner yesterday?
Here's a close-up of the turd that I did this
Yeah,
morning.
but it's gotten to that stage.
So when I made Sanctum, and Universal was handling the picture in North America, so we're in America and we're doing all the publicity, which is you're staying in the hotel and you're doing all the, what do they call it? You sit in a room and everyone
Yeah,
comes into your
yeah,
room
yeah.
and blah blah blah, the press thing or junket, and anyway, and then as part of that they go, oh, we'll build we'll create a Facebook page for you and a Twitter account. Now in those days, because we're going back to 2010 or something like that, so like literally 15 years ago, I was like literally like, what's a Twitter account? And because 15 years ago, Twitter was, it was this sort of unknown thing. It was this sort of an emerging kind of idea, and Facebook was a bit more established by then, but it still wasn't, even back then, it still wasn't like a thing really, and if you're an old bastard like me, I was a bit like, oh, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I'm not like built like that. Like I can't walk around recording my life and then sharing with people. Like I'm just not, that's foreign to me as an idea. So anyway, and they were like, no, you don't have to worry about it. We'll get someone to do it for you. So I was like, oh, okay, great. So then I didn't think about it. And sure enough, they had their publicity person who they built these accounts and set it up. And during the whole thing, did all this sort of stuff. And then about, a month after the film was released, or a couple of months or whenever it was, once it was out of cinemas, of course, then they stopped doing any updates
Yeah.
on any of this. But of course, they didn't give me, and I didn't even think about it because I was just not so foreign to it. Didn't give me like the passwords to access the accounts in my name. So there's actually there's a Twitter account and a Facebook account in my name that these guys set up that I can't access. And I've actually written to the things, and going, can you delete these, because it's not actually me, and I can't use my own name in the Twitter handle, which is kind of bizarre. So I mean, I have actually set up a new Twitter thing, but it's mainly, I'm so not. I need to have. don't even know what to say. I'm just like, it's so foreign to me. It's
I
hard to
know.
explain. It's so foreign to me, the idea of publicizing my life. Like, it's so dull. I love making movies. I hope people really enjoy the movies, but anything about my life is just tedious and awful, and no one wants to know. So, but
And you'd be surprised. You would be surprised.
maybe, I don't know.
But yeah, we will put the links to some of the stuff down below in the description. What before
Well,
I ask the
if
final,
you can put a link to my website is just
yeah,
alistergrierson.com. Like, how exciting is that? And and I mean, you can see some shit that I've done, I suppose, is there, but it's really more a professional website than a fan website, I suppose. But I promise you, this is because it is my big plan, because I've realised as we move forward into this next project, I'm going to have a standalone kid who I will exploit to the bejesus, who will do all of the social media posts on my behalf. That's my
yeah, because
plan.
I think people love seeing, and it's definitely gotten more and more and more now. Some of the behind the scenes. I've always been the one for uh, commentary tracks on physical media, and I do
Yeah.
think that that's definitely like starting to come back. Even people who I've noticed, who I would consider part of just like the mainstream audience, like friends and things like that, who are not super into movies, that have like watched movies now and went, I'd love to know what that guy or how they done that or why they done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of coming back around full circle now. Um, what is next for you then? Like what? And I don't mean that in the sense of like specific project, but I guess in your mind's eye, what is it that you feel like you've still left to achieve? Is there something that sits atop that list as like, that's, I have to do that before I'm happy?
There's two things I want to do. I want to do this movie that I mentioned before. It's called The End. It's this very strange existential comedy set in this genre type, like a cabin in the woods kind of cliche, which is all very deliberately, chosen. And it's a really great performance piece, and really funny. And I'm a real believer in it. And I'm just starting to hopefully build some momentum around it. So I want to do that because I think it's going to be, that's a real legacy thing for me, I hope, because my vision for it is the soundtrack. I just had this really strong thing that I want to do with the music. And it's a sort of a riff on filmmaking and psychology and being human and being alive and films, and it's and it's crazy, and it's got such a really strong voice. Again, it's like when I was saying before about um, oh God, Rob's script with
Yeah.
bloody hell. When you read a script and it has a voice, and the guy who wrote this is a guy called Vladimir, name escaped me. He's a Macedonian. It's a strange, it's like English is a second language. This thing, it's such a weird background to this. It's a whole other episode. But the voice was so strong and so clear. It's like, wow, okay. So I want to do that. That's a real must have to do before I die. And I've got another thing that I want to do. And I call it the Great Big Film. I don't really know what it is. It's a sci-fi concept, and it's a riff on lost civilizations and aliens, and a whole bunch of things. And I've come up with a sort of a conceit to background it. But the reason why I want to do it is I want to do a really big film. Like I think when I kind of got into this, the film I wanted to make was a James Bond movie. Like that's the movie that I wanted to make. Big, epic, international, beautiful girls, big movie stars, the whole shebang, all sorts of moving parts, and the complexities around dealing with the men and machines aspects, which I find really stimulating. And making Sanctum was like that too. When you work building these environments and you're underwater, and and the producer insists that you have to learn to become a cave diver before you can make the movie, and all this kind of madness, and people die on set, and it's like, not that they actually died on my set. There's a real tragedy around that picture because the producer lost his life. The lead underwater stunt woman died in a cave shortly after the film was made, in very similar circumstances. Just terrible. And good people. Anyway, I'm not sure we went down that sidetrack, but the men and machines aspects of making big pictures really appeals to me, and so it's just something I'd love to do. I'd love to have that experience. You know, I'm a sort of student of history. When you read those stories about Hollywood and the madness of it all, and the shit fights between the studio executives and the head of the studio and the crazy directors and the things, and I want to have that experience. I mean, I've had that experience, but only at this scale. I want to have it at this scale, just for my own vanity, I think, or conceit or ego or whatever the thing is. But that idea excites me. Just the craziness of it all excites me.
I love that, like,
it's a strange business,
that you still have that like desire and passion. That fire is still kind of burning through. My final question then is, I guess, why film? Why that why that medium, or whatever you want to call it? What does it mean to you? It can be from a personal standpoint or whatever. What was it that was like, that's the thing, that's the way I want to see my visions out, or that's the way I want to show myself to the world, or whatever it might be. Is there a particular thing that you can speak to that's like, yeah, that really encapsulates why?
That's a really interesting question, and I haven't really delved deeply into that myself, as opposed to other mediums, because I'm not naturally an artist. I don't think, like we're talking about David Lynch before, who is naturally an artist. If film didn't exist, he would need to paint or draw or build or sculpt or whatever. Like, he's an artist in that sense. There's some sort of innate desire to do that, and I don't think I'm naturally that. I think and we're going to the story about living on the RAF base and the cinema, and I think that had a big effect on me. I mean, it's a fundamental sort of point to my life, without sort of digging too deep, but you grow up as an Air Force brat, and I was backpacking as an 18-year-old through Europe, and I have a very distinct memory. I was lying on my backpack with a mate of mine. We were at a train station in Spain, Burgos, I think it was, somewhere in northern central Spain, waiting for the train, and it's all about waiting, and my mind drifted off, and I started writing this story in my head about a cat burglar, and I don't know where it came from, what it was, and it just sort of, I found it really kind of stimulating and sort of interesting, and thinking, it's, but then the idea of being a film director was so sort of foreign, like completely, like being an astronaut, like I don't know, like a brain surgeon, sort of like completely outside of the realms of possibility as a thing. And I'd actually originally wanted to be, because I grew up as an Air Force brat, as I say, and so the only thing I was exposed to were aeroplanes. So I wanted to be a pilot, and I applied to the Air Force and the flying stream, and they said no. Come back and reapply again in a couple of years when you're a bit older. And that was sort of a bit heartbreaking, and I was a bit lost because I'd only ever thought about that one thing. So I ended up at university, and then, and even though I really enjoyed university and I discovered a lot about myself, I think I discovered I was smarter than I thought I was. Like, I just assumed I was pretty stupid. But at university, I actually kind of tried for the first time in my life and discovered, you're not as stupid as you thought you were. And so that was an interesting breakthrough. And then I started getting into, and then, at school and at university, we were super into Monty Python, and obviously all the films and that sort of stuff. And then, so we started to do these staged review shows, like Footlights and stuff like that at uni. And then I was just like, you know what? I was studying economics, and I was like, I can't do this, I should be a Monty Python guy. So, why don't you become a film director and do comedy movies? Like, that's literally how stupid I was. And then I actually ended up living in Japan after that, because I'd been studying Japanese at university as well. And then it sort of solidified when I was there, and I was like, look, you've only got one shot at this life, and I don't know what being an economist means, but why don't you have a crack at being a film director, because it might be fun. And so I did, and it took 10 years from about that thinking to actually making my first movie. So it was a bit of a mission. Well, I'm sort of getting distracted. I'm telling you my life story, not actually about the difference between the.
Well, I think that all plays into it, and it's something that I know I do, and a lot of people listen kind of appreciate that reality behind a lot of these stories, where it's not just the because I think it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, I always just knew I was a visionary, and everything was great, and I live by the beach in a mansion, and it's just everything's great, every day is sunshine, everything's perfect, and then obviously now people I think are a lot more clued in, for better or for worse, with the likes of social media and stuff, that, oh wait, that other person also feels like I do, or the aspiring filmmaker that's listening, that's going, okay, maybe it's not all doom and gloom, but there is a degree of like grit and determination and sticking the course. It's that thing I always talk about. People always say to me, oh, you mention that all the time, the 10 the 20-year overnight success.
Yes. No, it was very much like that. And there was definitely a point though, and it was at university though, when it crystallized, and I just watched a couple of films, and and I don't encourage the children to do this, but marijuana may have had something to do with it. And just when you watch a couple of films, and Apocalypse Now was one of them, Blade Runner, of course, but Apocalypse Now, I distinctly remember just watching it and just being agape with some of the conceptual stuff inside it. And then when you realize that the medium it's not just Rambo, you know what I mean? It's not, ironically, a lot of the movies that I'm making are these sort of action, that they are kind of superficial, but really great movies, rich with, poor old Francis Coppola, his last movie was a dog, but anyway, that's another discussion. I shouldn't say that. Love Francis Coppola. But a movie like that, and you go, that's important. That's important. If you can get some of those ideas across, I don't know. I think that's the thing, when you're exposed to art and it sort of matters, and people are open to art mattering. There's some. I mean, it's very hard. It's a very complicated world we live in now. It's very hard to put your finger on what matters. I think there's still fundamentals, except that we've just had this argument over the last 10 years about things that matter. And I'm still not sure where we're going to kind of end up. But I think film is a way to explore some of those ideas about what matters and influence people. I don't know what the future is, because it's really tricky. I think cinema as a theatrical experience is going to get smaller and smaller, and we see that now. We're getting more and more of these smaller cinemas, which are really more like lounge rooms, and streaming, of course, getting bigger and bigger. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird concept. It's a weird concept. This has been fascinating for me, to be honest with you, just from a personal standpoint, to be able to actually finally sit down, albeit virtual, and have this conversation with you. And I know everybody listening will also appreciate a lot of the quite candid, I like that to a degree, for as much as somebody is comfortable with being kind of real and raw about things, and the story behind the filmmaker, I guess, or the creative. So I do massively appreciate that, Alister. for everybody listening, whether you're looking at this on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, down below we will have a link to the website, and then obviously, keep an eye for potential social media. We may get some social medias down the line.
I should put a page on, because on the website where people can leave comments or something, because I don't have that. Maybe I should do that. All right.
Because I think people are interested by that stuff. But like I said, this has been fascinating. It's I've taken up way more of your time than I initially had intended to take up, to be honest with you. I was like, okay, I have to be conscious of other people's time.
I've been working my way through a bottle of wine, so
it's all good. I hope that made it a little less painful. I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of that. Like I said, Alister, it's been fantastic to chat. I would love to keep in touch, and maybe down the line when there's some stuff that gets across the line, we could revisit and have another chat.
Yeah, please do, mate. No, thanks for reaching out. It's been great. No, it's really interesting. I hope I haven't been really boring. I do have the tendency to probably become overly serious. I don't think of myself as a serious person, but I think too philosophical, perhaps. I think going to what you're saying before, I think the thing is that people are always selling. I've always been terrible at selling shit, particularly myself. But and it's that kind of facade, and I get it. Like if you're a filmmaker, you're selling a product. You've got to be like, you'll love it. It's the best thing you've ever seen. I don't even know how to do that.
But it's funny now, like the first question always becomes, because I've done this for a while, and like I would just put up the chat or the interview or whatever, and the first thing I would always get is straight away would be, oh, where can I like follow this person? Where can I see like what this person does, or follow, what's going on with them? And I'm like, and then it started to dawn on me. I was like, okay, I never actually asked that question of somebody. Obviously, somebody may have a project to promote or something in specific, but I noticed it was like a reoccurring thing where people were like, is there anywhere like online I can like find out about this person and like see more of their journey? And it kind of dawned on me. I was like, wow, people are like way more interested in it just not being a one-off thing. They discover a new filmmaker or whatever, and they're like, huh, now I want to kind of have updates on, now, not to the degree of like, what did you have for lunch yesterday, but they seem to be fascinated with like behind the scenes shots. I see like Todd Masters, special effects makeup artist. He posts a lot of like little behind the scenes pictures from movies and sets he was on and different projects he worked on or whatever. And like, it seems to be really well received. And it could be from a movie from, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And people seem to love that. So it seems to be more of a thing.
It's interesting. And look, I don't know. I mean, I do have an Instagram thing, which I just did because my family had it and we could share pictures and stuff like that. And then it was like, I could follow some of the guys who are friends who are in the business and stuff like that. But I don't, and same, like I have a Twitter account, but it's under another name. I can't remember what it is now. So I follow stuff, but I don't post.
Yeah.
I suppose the thing for me is to sort of learn to post stuff. But at the moment, it just feels like everything's, the stuff that I'm posting is reacting to other people's comments or other people's shit. And it's, but I think it's just one of those things, like, if I'm making something and I'm proud of it and I'm working on it, then I feel like, well, I can post that. Like, But if I'm, do you know what I mean? Like, that's, anyway.
I 100% get what you mean. Like I said, man, it's been great. I do hope we can stay in touch, and I would love to do this again when some of those projects get over the line. You can talk about them properly. Maybe you can come back and we can have a chat again.
Yeah, for sure, man. Anytime. Been great. Been nice to catch up.
And like I said, for everybody listening, the link to the website will be down below in the description. So make sure and check that out. And like I said, appreciate your time, man. It's been great, and I can't wait to see what's next.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.